I'd like to call the meeting to order. Has there been declaration of public notice?
Yes.
Order of business, any proposals for change to order of business? I don't think anything is pressing. Public appearances? None. Then the consent agenda, I'd ask for motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Recognitions?
Okay, I'd like to begin by recognizing a gift that the board just approved in the consent agenda, $5,000 donation for the orchestra department from Don and Kathy Bernard. So again, a very generous and much appreciated gift.
Is that it?
Oh, do have a couple others.
Okay.
Next, students at Glacial Gentleman School held a penny war in order to raise money for Habitat for Humanity of Wisconsin. Students wanted to direct the donations to families whose homes were damaged or destroyed in the flooding seen in Wisconsin in August and September. And they donated $1,000, which Habitat for Humanity of Wisconsin used to purchase beds for low-income senior citizens whose homes and belongings were completely destroyed. And then in your board docs is a link to a little bit additional information. MG21 students joined other community storytellers at Story Jam, an event featuring short, thrilling tales of self-discovery on the theme of walking your path. That was sponsored by Monona Community Library. And again, we have a link to the actual recording of the event. We had schools throughout our district that participated in the Hour of Code. We know that whatever field our students choose to go into as adults, their ability to succeed will increasingly depend on understanding how technology works, use of critical thinking skills, collaboration, and problem solving. Coding and makerspaces help teach that to students. NBC 15 actually covered our Winnequa School's Hour of Code family event. And again, we have a link to that story. And lastly, we had our Monona Grove High School Skills USA students competed at the district competition at Portage High School. Students took home second place in carpentry and first place in electronics and CO2 dragster. So congratulations to our students.
So
Susan?
I just want to, and Dan has already talked about this before. Again, it was unfortunate, and I'm really glad that Dan mentioned that Will taped the Story Jam, because it's absolutely excellent. And so I went to that for about 20 minutes before we had a board meeting that night, so it made it really difficult to try and see much of it. But I did get to see the very beginning of Melissa, and it was just a great evening. It packed, and there were no parking. So, I mean, it was really neat. So watch the tape. I encourage you to watch the tape. And the other thing that I've learned, and I may not have this accurately, but the kids are pretty adamant about it. Apparently one of the Model UN awards we won is one of the highest awards that's ever been won by an MG high school student for Model UN, which they've been doing for years. So apparently that was pretty neat. And they're fundraising right now for another big trip. So, but apparently they're doing spectacularly. And again, I'd advocate one more time to take 5 minutes from a board meeting, come early if you can, and have them do a presentation. It's kind of like listening to Story Jam from the MG21 students. Sometimes we don't get that opportunity as a board. I think those are really neat experiences. Kind of like the program at Glacial Gentleman last night, and the high school the other night. The music program at Winnequa, and I missed the one at Taylor Prairie. It's cool.
Okay. Correspondence and announcements. Did you have anything?
I did not.
Eric, did you want to mention
I
something?
do. I have just correspondence, a legislative update. There were 18 different recommendations that the Blue Ribbon Committee presented to the state and
The Ribbon Committee on
education funding, fiscal educational funding. And they made a number of recommendations that will either come forward as individual bills or as budget motions. And there's 18 of those.
Thank you. Okay, special.
Can I just piggyback on that for a minute? Just because the Wisconsin Public Education Network is really encouraging us to be talking to our neighbors and community members about that report and about those recommendations and urging people to contact legislators to take them seriously. So, just want to add that.
I think it's very important.
Okay.
Well, and I would add, I don't know, we aren't going to meet till January, but I would say it's really important for us to get more information on this. So could we agendize it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very already, yes. Okay. Special reports, starting with the MG21. Their annual report.
I read the squabble over who sits where, right? Hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
Will you introduce
I
yourself?
should introduce
Yes.
myself. Okay. I'm Denise Peterson. I'm the president of the MG21 board.
I'm Ian Lowe. I am teacher and advisor at MG21.
Rebecca Fox-Blair, executive director and teacher at MG21.
Alyssa Hartson, teacher and advisor at MG21.
I want to thank you for all the support that you have extended to this school for many, many years, and say how happy we are to be back again to present our annual accountability report. Before I turn it over to the staff, I want to talk about this here just for a minute, because a lot is going on. One, we have the largest freshman class we've ever had at MG21. It's not been that many years that we were taking ninth graders, and we heard there's a need, and at first it was a little bit of a dribble, and now suddenly it's a flood. So we've really turned a corner in terms of students seeing us as a place they want to be from day one, which is exciting. Second, our middle campus planning.
How big is that class?
10, 11? 11?
Wow.
Yeah.
Which out of 50 is, you know?
The first year we offered, we didn't have any that started the year. We had 2 students that came to us midway through at the semester. So.
And we are at our largest with 50 students right now. So, you can see how we've grown over the years and feel very comfortable with the improvements that we've made and the growth in the student population reflecting that. We're excited about the planning for the middle campus. That's going along really well. I went with 2 other board members to visit a school in Wausau that's our mentor school for the grant recently, and we have meetings scheduled with some of the Glacial Drumlin staff who are interested in working with us, and also with some community members who are middle school teachers outside the district to kind of see what they have to say about the middle school experience. So we're tapping into community members as well. And we recently added 2 new members to our board, who I'm very excited about, and most of you are familiar with Tom Howe and Sue Carr. And we think they really add a great deal of wisdom and deep commitment to education to our board. So we feel like things are really going in a wonderful direction.
So you all should have received an actual copy of the accountability report, and we don't want to talk through the whole thing, but we just thought we'd kind of hit some of the highlights on that report, and then answer questions if you have that. As Denise pointed out, we had our enrollment kind of continues to grow. And last year we had a pretty strong graduation rate. Our goal is always 100% graduation. Last year we had 1 student who didn't return for senior year, and so he's considered a dropout, so that was a dropout for us. So we were sad for that student. He went into the workforce living on his own as a senior, so he wasn't able to navigate school in that. But our attendance rate was still at the 93%, which is our goal is at least 92% and above. One thing that we did differently, we've always had a student and parent survey, and I linked the data and also kind of pulled some pieces of data that are included in the report. But this past year, we did a survey called the HOPE survey, and that survey is designed to kind of assess students' in 6 areas. Let's see if we can name them all. Belongingness,
Goal orientation, academic press, engagement,
autonomy,
autonomy,
self-management.
it's the 5, autonomy and independence.
And so, and students take that when they first come in, so new students take it, and then everybody takes it in the spring. And so that data we also linked and included in the report, but we thought that was pretty significant because the people that kind of, it's through EdVisions, which is a Wisconsin-based organization that kind of supports schools, and they're the ones that kind of gather and assess the data and give us some feedback on it. And the feedback that we got from them was that the growth, the change showed
The growth that they saw from the students' attitudes about how they felt about school prior to coming to MG21, and then how they felt about their academic prospects and their belongingness at MG21, that growth and that was as large that they had seen in the 15 years that the Hope Survey has existed, which we feel really great about.
The other thing I guess I want to point out was just some of the other educational data that we included on the second page. We did have, once again, all of our students do 80% or better on the state of Wisconsin civics exam. The state requires 60%, but we require 80%. And thanks to Denise coming in and helping review and go over government stuff with our seniors, I felt like that was a really great thing. Most of the students scored 90% and better. All of our students did do proficient or exceptional on their digital portfolios, their graduation speeches. 90% of the students completed a senior capstone project. And 100% of our students participated in what we consider our service projects, the Build, Beautify, and Serve projects last year, at least one or more project. So we felt like that was some data that we wanted to call your attention to. We've also included a summary of our budget. And I don't know if there's any questions about that. Randy, you know the red or the black? Yeah. So.
So I'm just going to take a moment or two to talk about some of the highlights that we want to, I guess, gloat about, brag a little bit. And so one of the things that we really took to the next level last year was our restorative justice program and our restorative practices. So we really took huge efforts to integrate these practices into our everyday school lives. There's a misconception about restorative justice that it is something that happens when there's a conflict, and that is sort of the only way that restorative justice is used. But we engage in restorative practices with community building in the form of support circles. We welcome every student with our circles, and we also integrate it into our community building with advisory meetings, as well as bringing it into the classroom as well. One of the other really cool things that happened last year was at the Monona Grove Education Fund, Rebecca was honored for her amazing contributions to education. Not only was she recognized for being an amazing teacher and just being amazing for what she does, but she also was a recipient and was recognized for a $3,000 grant that we used for our senior wilderness trip, which I'll talk about in a second. We also have bees, and we're like a little obsessed with them. We love them so much. And we received a $3,000 grant, really cool project, because a student was the one that actually helped us write this grant with the Healthy Classroom Foundation. And it was through a class that we teach, a science class that we teach, and the idea is for our students to be active scientists as well as active citizens. And so we got our hive, got up and running, and it made its way through the winter, and then unfortunately our colony suffered a collapse in late summer, which happens. It's not a big deal, but the really cool thing is we're actually using that beeswax to make candles now. So students are learning how to make candles, and they've learned a lot about bee husbandry. It's a really cool project, and we'll get a new hive next spring. And then our annual senior wilderness capstone trip. We held over Memorial Day weekend, and it was, oh my gosh, I think we had like 15 or 16 students with us. And the only thing I'm going to say about that is it was hot. It was so hot. I think we broke. I think
93 degrees some of the days.
yeah, it was amazing. 3 days, 2 nights. It seemed like a low number of miles, but man, we were sweating. But it was still really powerful and memorable.
As far as continuous improvement goes, our big news, the big thing that we're working on this year is obviously our expansion grant. In July, I think, June, we got notified that we were a recipient of a grant from the Department of Public Instruction for $529,000 and change to add a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to our school. And so that was very exciting for us, and we've been spending a lot of time this year then looking at how to design and implement that new portion of our school. Currently, we've got I put the link to our Middle Campus website in there if you wanted to look. We've got some frequently asked questions and some beginnings of data and information for families. We have presented to the staff at GDS and the staff at Winnequa. We have presented to the PTOs at Winnequa and GDS, and we have had 2 info meeting nights that were open to the public to come in and kind of find out about the school. And we had pretty good turnout at both of those nights. And so there seems to be a lot of interest. We've got some applications. So we're cautiously optimistic that it's if you build it, they will come situation. We think that what we are in the process of creating is going to be really excellent and really add an opportunity and an option in our district for students. So we're really excited about this. And we've been also working with the administration to kind of look at designing the space and working, kind of getting that all kind of planned out, how that school is actually going to physically look as well. I don't know if there's any questions that people have about that.
And obviously, the expansion to the middle school is an incredibly exciting opportunity, and it's a heavy lift. So as we thought about and talked about and planned for what we would be doing and working towards as we expand to a middle school, we wanted to be really intentional to make sure that we didn't sacrifice in any way meeting the needs of our current students. And for us, that has always meant continuing to be innovative at the high school and continuously improving what we're doing and changing what we're doing at the high school. So we continue to do that for this school year at the high school, and I want to share some of the highlights of the things that are happening this year that represent some of that change and innovation that we're doing. We've got 21 proficiencies to kind of match with the 21st century skills that we wrote, that we hope every student who graduates will meet those 21 proficiencies, and they're connected to academic skills, personal growth skills, and community skills. And in order for students to organize and know that their projects are meeting those 21 proficiencies, we have a new project management system called EDIO that students are using and that we're using as advisors that help students set goals for their projects, connect their projects to specific proficiencies that we've identified. So that's a really exciting aspect of project-based learning that is going on this year. We also are proud of the equity and social justice work that we're continuing to do. This summer we hosted an equity and social justice workshop that's connected to our district's equity goals, and that's connected to the work that the Equity Alliance did last year. And so there's so much that our staff and other teachers at the school learned with the workshop with Dr. Arash Danish today. But at the heart of it is getting at the difference between inclusion and diversity, and making sure that our schools are inclusive and not simply diverse. And the best you can't wrap it up in one statement, but the best statement to represent that is diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And so giving students the opportunity to show who they are and be who they are and show themselves is a big part of the work that we're doing around equity and social justice, and a key takeaway from this summer's work. We continue to look for ways to improve math. In years past, we talk about the ways in which the independent nature of Alex Math is really good for our students because they work at their own pace, but we also don't want to lean too heavily on that as a program. So we've partnered with Matt Hayden, the district math coach, to have ideas about how we can utilize math games and mathematical thinking in our math program alongside Alex Math. Alyssa did a great job of describing what we're doing to infuse restorative practices throughout our day, and we continue to strengthen that. We're really happy that we've got a partnership continuing with YWCA so that we can train our staff and train circle keepers to infuse restorative practices throughout our school. And then finally, we've worked closely with Julie Theato, our reading coordinator, to make sure that we're embedding active reading strategies throughout all of our classes and what we're teaching in terms of students' project-based learning, so that there isn't just reading time, that we are teaching reading skills in science class, in social studies classes. And so we're excited about the different active reading strategies that we're using in our classes this year.
And just to clarify, we did present to you last year the 21 proficiencies. We'd worked on that. What happened this summer is we spent a tremendous amount of time actually turning those into more specific learning targets. And so they're worded very differently, and they've got actual measurable things in there. They're not just a vague statement. So they look very different. So we included them as one of the addendum items in the report.
Okay,
Are there any questions?
very good. Thank you. Questions? Dean?
Do you interact with other schools of your type?
Sure.
Others? Is there a league of you? Do you meet or you are standalone?
There are a couple of ways that we interact with other schools. There are a number of different there's an annual Innovative Schools Conference that we attend where we network with other schools. There are schools in our area that we network with and partner with. Last year, as part of our the ethics symposium that we do with the Rotary Club, we networked with a school in Milwaukee that we had connection with that's also a similar kind of charter school, and we did the ethics symposium with students from that school. So yeah, we try to go to visit other places, and we network with other staff.
And I think we're really fortunate that the Independent Schools Network has its annual conference here in Wisconsin.
It's innovative.
Innovative, sorry. But there are schools coming from all over the country, and you don't have to pay for us to go. It's right there.
It's in the Dallas.
So it's quite nice.
Susan?
I just wanted to mention again, I was really impressed with the $3,000 grant from Healthy Classrooms because I'm on that board and have been for several years. And we get tons of applications. This one was, and I don't review the applications, we just see them after, basically, on the recommendations. And again, we don't give $3,000 out usually. We give $1,000. So they obviously were impressed with the way it was written and with the thought concept of what you wanted to do, which was pretty innovative for the kinds of things that other schools propose. So again, those are it's exemplary with the kinds of things you're doing.
And it's been a really great learning experience for our students because even though the hive had to collapse, trying to figure out what happened and why was really like a kind of a scientific thing, and being able to kind of unpack what things, it looks like we had weevils. Is what it looks like. There was some weevils that kind of infested hives near the end of the summer around the area, and it looks like that may have been what took our guys down. But we're kind of figuring out what to do next and how to kind of prevent that.
I think the biggest takeaway for me with that project was how connected our students got to these little bugs. Just little bugs, and they stink, but they're obsessed with them. They'll go out, and kids that you wouldn't think are putting their hand down to let the bees crawl on their hands, and they don't wear the masks. It's just it's wild. I mean, they love them. So it's really powerful stuff. Yeah.
Quick question. So your middle campus, you're projecting, or it's going to start September of 2019? And how many students per grade, 6, 7, and 8 are you?
We don't really have a per grade because it's a multi-age configuration of students.
Okay.
So the goal would be obviously to kind of have it evenly distributed, but we're hoping to start with 30 students the first year and then add an additional 20 students the second year. So we'd have a total of 50 students. And so
Okay.
basically middle campus would have 50, upper campus would have 50, and there'd be 100 students in that space.
Okay.
Yep.
So how long have you guys really bought in? I know it takes a while to get going. How long have you guys bought into restorative justice?
How
How long have you guys really implemented and done
It,
this?
I think the way that it's really worked for our school, and everyone can speak to it, but I feel like Alyssa alluded to, it's not just a disciplinary thing. It's not
Right,
like,
no, I
oh,
get
you're in
that,
trouble. And so the way that it's really kind of happened is there's really a lot of power in the circles.
Right.
And so doing those kinds of circles of support, circles of welcome, we've had circles for parents, we've had circles for a kid with parents, and so being able to kind of use that model really has, I think, the kids feel the power of it, and they've had such positive experiences that that's how it's gained traction in the school.
Because I see no out of school suspensions and only 8 incidents, or 8 incidents out of school, no expulsions. Has that been a problem like years before that, and then?
Typically not, because we are so small. We're able to do a lot of preventative stuff regardless. But I feel like this just has really infused kind of how we're navigating conflict in the school, and just not conflict.
Right.
And I think that, it's our 3rd year of implementing it, but it's grown every year. And it, from my perspective, I started to really learn about it when I participated in a seminar alongside students, and I was truly in the circle alongside students. So a big part of restorative practices is flattening those power hierarchies that exist in schools naturally, and kind of, and so the opportunity for students to see me in that way, and for me to see them in that way, kind of, it changes the dynamics in really powerful ways. And I think we're really fortunate because our entire staff has been able to participate in some capacity throughout. So we have, all of us are on board and believe in it. And so that's been a big asset for us.
Because you took students to Fania Davis, right?
I did. Yeah.
It's powerful when students can see,
Yeah.
instead of just the adults always getting training.
Yeah.
And her sidekick was really powerful too.
Yes.
As well. Wish I could remember that. Okay, another question. What time do you guys start school again? You guys start.
8:45, we
And
want students in the building,
and that's
then
been going well.
that goes well for us. And then the morning meeting starts at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
But we're open at
And what about
7:30.
6, 7, 8 now? What same plan?
I'm not quite sure. We have to negotiate buses and kind of fine tune that. I don't think it will be quite as, I think it'll be a little bit earlier start, but I'm not really sure yet.
Okay. Because it's starting to take off throughout the country.
The later start, absolutely, absolutely. And that was a student-initiated change that happened a number of years back.
Dean?
One thing you didn't mention was, what about community service? You reach out?
Yeah, that's the Build, Beautify, Serve projects that are referenced in here are our community service projects. So we do a lot of different things. We do what we call Project Monona, which is all the service projects related to the Monona Festival, the Fall Festival, working with the rec department, working with the library and the book sale. So we do a lot of those kinds of things. We still do service work for Aldo Leopold. We are saunterers, so we do service projects with the Ice Age Trail Alliance. We do service at the Second Harvest Food Pantry. We did sandbagging in the fall, the early, the late summer. So whatever kinds of service projects that either come our way or that students are deciding.
If my wife were here, she'd want to thank you because she has a lot of responsibility for that library book sale. I know you folks contribute a lot there.
Well, again, the sandbagging was absolutely huge. It was a point where we were having major breaches that were now potentially affecting homes, and people had to go back to work. They've been working down there for 2 to 3 weeks, and this whole crew showed up. And just, again, if you don't have the bag, you're way too far behind the breach, and you're going to be in trouble. In fact, the kid's picture is up on the front of the Ken's, at Ken's, in case you missed
Oh.
it. Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Eric?
What will be the total amount of students with the 6, 7, and 8?
Roughly around 100 altogether.
And where do you see MG21 in like 5 years from now? That's just your opinion. Where do you picture it?
I don't see us getting like necessarily bigger because we like the smallness. Like our small size is intentional. I think we serve the students of the district in a positive way at that size. I do see us 5 years from now with a much more like established program. I see, you know, being able to partner with the district on all of this. I guess I envision, you know, a really strong 6-12 project-based opportunity for students in this district that has an environmental aspect, has a wellness piece. You know, if I was to describe what is that middle school going to look like, it's still going to be project-based learning, but it's going to be through a whole child wellness lens. And I see that as being a really positive thing for middle schoolers and being a positive piece of the whole MG21 program.
Would you say with 100 students that all of you pretty much know each student and they know you, all of you, for the most part?
Right now we're at 50, but I would say yes,
With
absolutely.
100, it'll be the same as it is.
We hope that would be our goal,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you know that's part of why we like that intentional small size is because we feel like those relationships are so integral to student success.
Rebecca, one more time, invite the board and Andrew is there to graduation.
Yes, you're absolutely all invited to graduation. I'll send you an invitation as it gets closer, but I think that the date for this year is kind of early because everything is early. I think it's May 30th. It's the Thursday before the main high school's graduation. It's typically our graduation at the community center. So please come and join us if you can. It's always a nice celebration and a great opportunity to hear from students about their experiences.
Gives you a very clear picture of the relationships that you have with the students.
Susan?
Well, I just want to add that I always look forward to your report every year because, to me, your report is always the epitome of continuous improvement. I mean, it seriously blows me away every year. The fact that it's never, you know, you don't ever settle with, like, you're successful and you're doing a great job, but you don't ever just keep doing the same thing. You're always digging deeper, and the mental health things you've added, all the stuff you've added is fabulous. So thank you very much for all the work you do. It's great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share this with you. And thanks for all your support.
I do appreciate the enthusiasm, the innovation, the enthusiasm for innovation, for doing new things here that you bring in here. It's always very interesting. My question would be one I ask, I think, every year, which is, what have you learned in the last year, and what are particularly those things that might be applicable to the larger student body, to the other schools? What have you taken on that you find you've been successful with, and maybe things that haven't been so successful that are lessons learned that the rest of the district could benefit from?
Well, I definitely think the restorative practices piece is a huge piece for us, and I feel like that's something that we can push out and share with the rest of the district. I know that there are other schools that are doing restorative practices, and I feel like collaborating together would be a really positive thing. I think we have some very strong student leaders in that area, and I think that they could, you know, last year we did have the opportunity to work with some students at the high school, and that was a really positive thing, and I think, you know, continuing that is an area of strength for us.
You only have to have one.
Well,
That's good.
I think the other area that we continue to kind of push with our students is the idea of really how to best help students develop self-management skills, and how to really, so trying out the new EDIO project management system. I don't know if you're familiar with Trello. It's a more business-related management system, but that's what EDIO looks like. It looks a lot like Trello, so it allows kids to kind of have a task board and to set deadlines and to move things around and to kind of manage their work. And I feel like putting that in place gives the students a lot of ownership over what they're doing, what they're learning, what they need for graduation and kind of meeting those goals. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that one in the report, and that caught my attention. Is that I think is a really good idea, something to teach students, give them the skills and techniques for time management and personal management.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something all of our students could use. It's an excellent example. Any other questions? Thank you very much, John, for just coming here.
Thank you.
For your dedication, not just for coming here tonight.
All right, and look for more info about the middle school campus. It's coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our facilities planning update with UA and Findorf representatives.
Okay, while they're setting up, I just want to bring your attention to a number of documents that have been uploaded the last 2 days on board docs. It's kind of background information. You don't need to have them all necessarily for tonight, but they're there for your reference. So tonight's presentation, they were bringing hard copies up. We just got it uploaded as well electronically a little while ago. And then the other thing, under the administrative content are some draft documents. That's why they're there, because they're still works in progress. But included in there are just 2 communication pieces that Katie put together. She's not able to be with us this evening, but again, just as an FYI with regard to communication moving forward. We can talk more about that at the next meeting when she's present.
Maybe it was already charged, but it's,
Thank you.
oh, so it's not working?
You don't need it.
Must just be charged from before.
You want to pass this?
Hit the button.
Eric says I can find this.
No,
Right, I was all of a sudden.
Mine's charged and his isn't, so mine's still
Oh.
at least running.
Well, here, let me move mine over to this one.
I'm gonna fix it too.
Thank you for that. Okay. These plugs are just, thank you.
I'm charging. I'm here.
So we don't have this. This,
Are they all
It's loose over here on the charger
Is
tag.
everybody losing power?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We've almost
Now you got it, right?
Well, it's all plugged in. I mean, the one night, we were confused about mine, it wasn't, the plug wasn't.
Some
Oh,
Jared
plugged
always
in.
gets
We haven't noticed it, so
What's that?
we have computer problems.
No, we're not noticing
look
computer
at that.
problems.
I'm gonna have to step out of the room.
So it wasn't plugged in.
Plug
so
adjourned if you.
this wasn't uploaded, all right?
Just, it was recent, it is there now, if you want to follow.
And which?
Under the public content is the first document called,
Design after
Whoa.
process.
yeah, process after
Oh,
referendum.
okay.
That's a good thing that shows.
Are we ready? Everybody's all set. All right. Hello again. Bob Weigert from Epstein Union Architects.
Mhm.
Project manager, also basically your main contact from now until whenever. First off, congratulations. Great work in communicating really an effective project or projects for the district and putting together what I would say is a great project. Some of the things that we're going to go over tonight, project scope, which is really, I've taken all of the information right from the referendum flyer that was sent out. I mean, that is ultimately what we need to provide and include in the scope of work. I want to talk about the architectural process and actually the whole process, what that looks like. Give you a snapshot of what the schedule looks like for the next really couple of years. And then talk a little bit about when we'll be back to the board as far as updates go. So again, this is information pulled right from the referendum flyers. I always tell people, you know, we have a budget and this is it. We don't go over the budget. If we are able to save dollars and do something different with it within the scope of the work, you know, we try and get as much value in as we possibly can. But both UA and Findorf realize that these are the numbers that we need to adhere to. So we kind of talked about these as being the non-negotiables as far as things that need to be included. And then as you recall, there's the maintenance list of all those other things that fit within here as well. So this is really the guiding tool that our team is using when we start looking at the scope of work that we're going to be including.
Do you want to save questions till later, or do you have?
Feel free to ask now.
About
Sure.
this one, I'm just wondering, if, for example, we find that the cost of some of those core spaces goes up, would there possibly be a thought to 8 sections per grade and then a couple other classrooms that could be, I mean, I'm just wondering that, because in the past, with all of our buildings, the core structure has suffered in the end. And I just wonder if there's a way we can make sure that doesn't happen this time. Do we have that kind of flexibility, or?
Well, I would say that I think you have the right team
Okay.
to make sure
Well, I
that
hope
doesn't.
so.
So we are in the process of planning the new building right now. We're also in the process of looking at the existing buildings and the renovation that's going to be included.
Okay.
And like I said, this is what we are charged with, and this is what we're adhering to. Working closely with Peter and his team at Findorf, that's our job, is to make sure that what we've said, we've talked about that the core spaces of that new facility accommodating 700 and having the ability to incorporate some additional space in the future if necessary. That's what we're going to be doing. So we aren't starting out saying, well, let's look at an 8-section school. We're at a 9-section, and we're looking at building those core spaces for those 700. If you remember, the core spaces again are really the gymnasium, the cafeteria, those specials like art, music, making sure that we've got enough of those spaces for those students. Because it's difficult to add on sometimes to a cafeteria, and a gym, again, how would you do that depending on where it is? So, really that's our charge.
Okay.
And that was something, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, if you go back
Sure.
just one slide about the new elementary school. Yeah. The second bullet where it says, and I understand what you're saying, but to really understand it, I had to hear what you said. And this is a document that is going to be out in the public view where they can see it.
Mhm.
So one of the things that we've talked about, and I know Andrew talked about it extensively when we were talking about the actual building plan, and that is the ability to accommodate potential future expansion for additional increases in size. And we, again, because of the issues that have arisen early in Glacial Drumlin, I think we're particularly sensitive about things like the gym and cafeteria. But when you read this, it sounds like gym, cafeteria, and other core spaces sized to accommodate potential future classroom addition. Straight up, I don't know. I don't have a clue, and I'm a board member, what that actually means. So if in fact we're building the building to be able to expand it if we needed to, if we had 100 students in this age group in 2 years, could we add a classroom, and would the core, as you say, the core space is sized to accommodate potential future expansion if needed? And then does that also include classroom space?
I didn't quite follow the last part of your question.
yeah.
So the charge that we were given from the district was ultimately the building would hold 700 students.
Right.
So the core spaces are designed for 700 students. Right now, we're designing a 9-section school, which I believe is about 625 or something like that. So at the end of the day, it's really only adding about 3 classrooms, if you will, to get to that extra. So as we start to design the building, we're looking at, okay, where could we add those in the future? How could that shift? So the core spaces, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, like I said, music, art, those types of program spaces, all of that is being designed for the 700. And then for the learning spaces, like a classroom, if you want to call it that, we're designing where would those go? How would those fit into the overall plan?
No, let me give you a very clear example.
Sure.
When you build a gym that is totally enclosed on all sides, it is effectively almost impossible to expand that gym.
Correct.
So that made us very conscious, and our cafeteria space, which we can expand by adding on. So I think what I'm looking for is language that is clear to the community that one of the things we're going to do is design this in a way that, if needed, we could accommodate growth. Such as I could add a classroom on here because there's still an acre here to do that. I could expand the gym and it's not enclosed. I could add another music room or make the music room bigger. I mean, those kind of concepts. And this, to me, doesn't say that. And to me, maybe I'm very limited view, but this is the piece I'm getting all the time now. Will you be able to expand that building? And I say, oh yes, the board was very clear on that.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't think you can really visualize until we have the land plot and the actual, we can actually see.
Can we say this better though?
May I suggest that if we're going to make, that we worry about a presentation to the community or documents we're going to present to the community about this at another time, and so that we can get through this tonight, because this is intended for us. Yes, it's published, it's posted, but it is not our main communication.
I admitted at the beginning, Peter, that I did not understand that bullet, so forgive me for being not quite sharp enough tonight, but I didn't, and I'm trying to make that clear. So if I don't, I'm guessing there might be maybe one or two others who might not also understand it, and I was trying to find a way, because that's a critical element of our going forward here, is getting the unified school district to support this building in a positive way.
Right, so all of
that's
this,
all I'm looking
all
at.
of that information was pulled right from the referendum flyer that was sent out to the district. That's not a sentence that I put together. That was right in the flyer. This information that was sent out to the district, to all residents.
Well, and that's why people were critical about it. So
Okay.
I'm just bringing that to you. It's your choice.
I think maybe another way to word it, if I could just take another couple seconds to word this. You're sort of looking at two different expansions, right? You have a school that's built, and you might say in the future you want to add students. Well, that needs two things. It needs classrooms, and it needs core spaces. And so let's say we go into the future, 10 years from now, and say, I want to add 3 more classrooms to this. We might have the conversation, well, you need to add 3 more classrooms, which we have acreage for, and we're planning for where that might be. That'll be part of the drawings. But then you might say, we also need to expand the gym and cafeteria. What this design incorporates right now already incorporates that expansion. It's not saying we can do it. It's like the gym is already big enough for that bigger school 10 years from now.
Right.
I'm just picking an arbitrary number for years. So,
I would just say those 2 bullet points don't capture the discussion.
Sure. No, but these bullet points are the bullet points that we as a board decided upon, and they are here. Are just putting those as reference for us, so that they know that
But
these
Peter,
are our
the
requirements.
information that we discussed also had the size of the school, number of potential pupils and that sort of thing. And we talked about core space for X number of pupils and immediate classroom space for the others. And I think those bullet points, if that is to guide planning, does not capture that as clearly as it should be.
yeah, let me just be clear.
Put it that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to debate it.
Sure.
I just think it ought to be understood by us that that's it, because I agree with Susan that that's been a lingering issue.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, we have very detailed documentation we put together pre-referendum with that. That is what is guiding the process. This is just a summary for tonight's PowerPoint. This is, those 2 bullet points, that's all that is.
I'm just saying, it doesn't capture it, and I just don't want you to tell me later that we had it up on the bulletin board. Because it's not all there.
Okay.
Karen?
So again, we've just pulled this off from that flyer, the fact sheet that was sent out. And again, this is the information that we are designing towards at the moment. So I did want to go through the architectural design process. So I handed out this particular document. And just to kind of show you how it works, we've got different phases of design. we've got schematic design, design development, construction documents, and then the construction itself, and then the project is complete. The schematic design, if you think of that kind of as that napkin sketch, if you will, that's the phase we are in right now. Design development is really taking that napkin sketch and doing more of a hard line diagram and getting a little bit more information into the design. The construction document is where we're starting to add those dimensions and notes and specifications and really solidifying things. The building construction, obviously, it's under construction. Some of the highlighted pieces within the schematic design, and I want to talk a little bit about what the diagrams represent. So you'll notice that there's a square and then it shows a cylinder. That's really showing change. And if you think about it, if we're doing a napkin sketch, it's easy to draw a couple of lines on a napkin, grab another napkin, and draw a couple other lines. So it's easy to make changes. The further we go into the process, the harder that becomes, or the more work that it becomes to make a change. So what we're showing is in schematic design, the little box that says design change has a lower impact on budget. That's really, if we make a change at some point, it's pretty simple to make. And if you think, I like to use the example of if we were going to put a gym on this side of the building as compared to this side of the building. As we work through the process, if all of a sudden we get to construction and our documents are done and we showed the gym over here and all of a sudden you go, hey, we want to move the gym over here. All of our drawings now have to be redrawn. There's a cost to doing that. So that's really what that's trying to show is you'll notice in the first schematic design there's a small stack of coins and a small dollar bill. As you go further through the process, it becomes more costly to make those changes. So that's the process that we like to work through up front, is really making sure that we've got spaces adjacent to where they need to be. So that's kind of how that works. As you work through schematic design, I'll click through here, and this is the information just blown up on individual slides. So it's really establishing the core team. The core team is meeting, and really, if you think about it, they're keeping everything on track. Looking at schedule, looking at budget, looking at design, doing those types of things. And as I mentioned, the schematic design is really a preliminary napkin sketch of what the building looks like in plan, and then also in elevation. We're starting to look at some mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, kind of locations as well. When we get into design development, again, that's taking that napkin sketch and starting to do some hardline work on it. We're starting to get our consultants involved a little bit more, and they're starting to do some design work as well. In this process, we will be talking with staff as well. If you think about like an art room, for instance, we need to understand what is in that art room. If they have cabinetry, how does that work? If they have sinks, how does that work? So we like to meet with the staff and better understand what their needs are. Again, all the while making sure that we fit within the scope of work that you've all charged us to fit within. When we get to construction documents, really at that point, most of the decisions are done. We don't necessarily say that you can't change anything. We might go through a process and go, hey, can we move this door from here to here? Those are simple changes. And that does happen through construction documents. Again, the construction documents, most of the decisions are done. The layout is pretty well set, and we are adding dimensions, notes, we're doing the specifications. Consultants are doing their work and finalizing their drawings. It's at the end of this phase then that we give our drawings to Findorf, and they start to go through their bidding process with subcontractors.
Can I ask just one quick
Sure,
question?
yeah.
One of the concerns that I've heard, and I appreciate that you're putting on establish a core team and a visionary team, is food services.
Mm-hmm.
That it's my impression that no one has spoken with them or had any discussions with them. Maybe that's not accurate as of this time, but I just want to validate that they will be involved.
Right. It's not inaccurate at this time. We have not we haven't spoke to any staff yet.
Okay.
We are in the process of really laying out the building. Once we kind of get that laid out, and we're doing that with the district, once we get that laid out, that's when we start to go. So when we get to the design development, that's when we go in and we start talking to staff about, and the kitchen people. We'll have a kitchen consultant that'll be on board as well to help with that layout, but we'll be talking to staff at that point.
But we definitely will be, for instance, talking with the head of food services,
Yep, absolutely.
because I think she has pretty impressive background after working at Glacial Drumline for a period of time. About, I'm not talking about designing a kitchen, I'm talking about meeting the needs of the students. So we don't want to start breakfast at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Excuse me. Yeah, and like I said, those conversations typically start to happen around design development.
Okay.
Right now, we're talking about more adjacencies. Where do things go? Where is art? Is it next to music? Is it next to gym? Where is that? That's kind of the phase we're in right now. Once we get through the bidding process, construction will start. There will be meetings held for construction on site every week, every other week, however Peter decides to do that. And then at the end of the day, the project is complete. That's really when the building warranty begins. And at that point, we also schedule follow-up walkthroughs. So we'll do like a 1-year and a 2-year scheduled walkthrough, really for two purposes. One, to find out, is the building operating the way that it's supposed to be? So are there warranty things that Peter and his team need to come back and make sure get addressed? The second thing that we like to do is understand how is the building working from an educational standpoint. We're going to spend the next almost 12 months, 10 months designing this building. Then it's going to be another 1.5 years or so when you move in. We want to come back a year after you've been in there and find out how is the building working for you. And I can tell you, in almost every project, there's great ideas, and we'll implement it, and we'll come back in a year later, and they're like, we thought this was going to be a great idea, and after we got in there, we thought, let's change this a little bit and make it better. So even preconceived ideas of how a space might work, once they're in, there are kind of changes that occur. Not from a renovation standpoint, I'll say, but just from a functional standpoint. So those are the things that we like to find out so that we can incorporate those in the future projects. Just to kind of give you a little bit of a view of the timeline here. So like I said, we're in schematic design. That's going to go through March. So we'll start talking to staff sometime in March, before the end of the year, the school year. We'll be done with design development in June. Construction documents will go through November, and that's when we're going to give those drawings to Findorf and Pete and his team. And then construction, I put spring. It's really, however the bidding process goes, and really dependent on weather, how quickly they can get in the ground in spring. And then we're looking at wrapping up for the school year of 21. So Peter's going to talk a little bit about their role, Findorf's role on the project as well.
Thanks, Bob. As Bob said, my name is Peter Sandin. I'm a project manager with Findorf. I think I saw some of you on some of the other meetings we had. So we get in on the project really early. And so as the construction management partner, we're a partner who's hired by the district in this case, and we're responsible for facilitating the construction process, really from as early as you've seen me, which is starting with the FAC and working through the referendum process all the way to the end. And as a construction manager, we try to do that in a manner that suits the owner. So our role then is really a supportive role, but it's also an advocacy role. So the project is happening, and you as the district are trying to direct that, and we're in the middle. So we're an advocate from the district to the project and what you're directing us, but we're also a support for the things that are coming up from the project and the questions and issues that might come up. So that's one role. We do that through working you through technology, furniture, equipment, decisions like that, working with the local AHJ, which is an acronym for Authority Having Jurisdiction. So we're already getting our first couple acronyms in there. You're going to see a lot of these. But working with the local authority having jurisdiction, whether it's the fire department or the building inspection or any of the authorities that have a say in a project. We also will work with subcontractors and vendors to help put the project together. We don't, as a construction manager, Findorf actually has the ability to do some of the trades, but we don't do all of them. And even some of those trades, we would discuss how that process works out as well. And then any other miscellaneous items that come up, communication, we're still heavily involved in that, working hand in hand with the architect. We're proud to work with the UA. We work with them on a lot of schools, a lot of success, and managing that budget. Another thing for us too as a construction manager that once again, we serve the district, we try to have an open book and be very transparent with our decisions, whether it's finances or just the decisions throughout the construction process. We'll show you both sides of both the decisions when it comes to construction. Also, like I said, as part of the district advocate part, we want to facilitate the process based on your direction. We have built a lot of schools. We know how the construction process works, but as you pointed out, Sue, there's some intricacies to each district and what are the hot buttons and what matter. And so we want to listen to that and build it that way as well. And I think a lot of what you're seeing already, and hopefully you see in the first set of schematic design, is coming out of what we've heard from you as well. And then also, as an advocate, we want to talk about alternative delivery options. So delivery is, if I'm talking delivery options, I'm saying, how do we go from now to having a school? So delivery is, how do we deliver you a school? There's a couple different ways to do that, and when the time comes, we'll walk you through those different ways, and we'll advise on what some of the positives and negatives or drawbacks are of those ways and help you make that decision as well. Also, as a member of the project manager role, there's different stages. So the pre-referendum and pre-construction estimating, we've already done that. So when we first interviewed for this, that was one of the points we had, is that we want to help manage the budget from the beginning to the end to make sure that we don't go over budget. Once again, that's something EUA is passionate about too. We do that through the beginning till even now. We have regular meetings scheduled with EUA, so when they're putting their drawings together, we're there reviewing it with them. Yeah, this is what we had in the budget, or no, we need to tweak something here. And so we have a really good working relationship in that way, so that we can ensure that, well, we all know that the 57 million can't grow, right? And so as this is being designed, we're integrally involved with EUA for both value analysis and constructability. Sometimes there's maybe some experiences we're having on other projects that we can share with EUA and say, actually, if we build it this way, there could be some cost savings. And so that's another benefit to a good relationship there. Also, I talked a little bit about project delivery. That's a role we serve. We do put the projects out to bid for a lot of the trades, whether it's electricians or HVAC, flooring, a lot of that stuff as well. And then talking about alternate delivery options, like I said, we'll probably set a bridge when it comes to it. And then lastly, for this section, project oversight, being completely responsible for the schedule and the total project budget. That's something we're already being involved in, working with EUA on. And the schedule, what you saw there was kind of five big bullet points. You start next spring of 2020 and school opens fall of 21, right? Well, there's a lot more that goes into that. And so we'll be providing a full detailed schedule for each of the projects, whether it's the new school or all the renovations as well. For the budget process, like I said, we started already in the pre-referendum phase, now in the design phase. The biggest key is that we want to make sure ensure the scope aligns with the budget, keeping that scope discipline. And we've already had a bunch of meetings with Dan and Jared and Jeff and the EUA team and just trying to voice what we see in the budget and what is happening with the design. So we want to be an advocate on that side of things. Sometimes it doesn't make us super popular because if we add that, we're going to be over budget. Do we want to make a decision somewhere else? But that's what we're here for. We're here to help guide the project to the budget that we got approved by the district. During the bidding phase, we facilitate the entire bid process. We evaluate the bids, looking for the lowest qualified bidder, and we will make recommendations based on both our experience in the industry and with these contractors. But at the same time, it would ultimately be we would present this to the district for these bids, and they would look at that and help make that decision and ultimately make the final decision on some of these. And that's something we're familiar with. We do with a lot of the districts we go through. And then lastly, as part of the bidding phase, would establishing a GMP, another acronym. It's a guaranteed maximum price. And so that's where we say, okay, for this school, this will be the GMP, and that will help wrap up the contract between the CM and the district. And we do that once we have the final drawings and once we've put things out to bid. And hopefully by that point, if we've been had a good relationship with the EUA and we've communicated well with the district all throughout the process of the design, then when we get to the bids, there's not surprises because we've been giving you the best information on pricing that we have given the design we're seeing throughout the process. And then lastly, the construction phase is managing the schedule and managing subcontractors and subcontractor change orders and trying to mitigate and minimize that. And we do that by planning things in advance, by looking at the documents early on with EUA and with some of the subcontractors and really trying to mitigate the holes and the potentials where they could come to us as a team trying to look for a change order. and as a part of that, advocating for the district to minimize the impacts both schedule-wise and cost-wise to the project. The last thing is for communication, we regularly meet as a team, as a construction team. We regularly meet as a core team. So there's a lot of communication already happening, and we haven't even started the construction process. But one thing we do is we will come in and do board updates as needed. We can give updates on the budget, give updates on the schedule, any of the site logistics issues or items or anything that's good, bad, or ugly we can chat about. And also we do construction updates, a couple things that actually is kind of fun. We do executive summaries, which is a little 1 or 2 page sheet, shows you pictures of what the project is looking like at the moment. It also will give you the overview of what we're working on now and where we're going later. Just a one sheet that everybody can look at and feel like they're more involved in the project and more knowledgeable. And then the other thing too, we'll do periodic tours with the board or sometimes the staff throughout the project at predetermined intervals and milestones to the project.
I think that was it, right?
That's the last.
So the, Peter talked a little bit about the construction updates. As far as design updates, we will be back as well, points along the way. We showed the schedule. There's a lot of things that are happening during those schedule components, during schematic and design development, for instance. We've got plan commission and things like that. We want to make sure that you see that stuff before we get to plan commission. So we will be back showing you design, materials potentially, things like that as well, as we move through the design process for the next few months as well. The other document that I just want to point out real quick is the one that's stapled together. Peter talked about kind of things that we're going to say, the authority having jurisdiction, AHJ, for instance. This is kind of a cheat sheet for you, if you will. So when we talk about schematic design, I might say the SD phase or something like that. What the heck was Bob talking about again? What does SD mean? This will be a good cheat sheet for you. The front part of this, just to explain what this means, so there's an arrow on the front, and then there's the pie chart. It's really showing the dollars for the project. So the big arrow, the big yellow arrow on top of the front sheet is really the project budget. And as we move through the process, there's the design piece that's a relatively small part of the budget. There's also contingency then. As we get further and further into the project and we have less unknowns out there, there's more contingency potentially that becomes available for alternates or other things that we want to put back into the project. So this just kind of shows you a little bit about how those dollars kind of flow through the project along with the pie chart. And like I said, the other information is really more kind of a cheat sheet information for you as we talk about schematic design, a little bit more of a written definition of those things as well. So this is a resource for you along with the architectural design process sheet as well.
And we don't want to assume that everybody is experts or not experts on this, but any questions when it comes to anything with what we're saying, either tonight or going forward, we're here as an asset to you. Whether it's an acronym or trying to understand a construction process or a design process, we want to be an asset and an advocate and support for the board.
Good. Questions? Dean?
It seems to me that one prospect is that your company could get the construction contract. And you're doing the architectural work. Is that now who keeps you two honest?
We keep each other honest. Peter talked about being an advocate for the district. That's our job as an architect. My role as an architect is to work for you and to ensure.
Clarify it for me, because it seems to me that if Findorf receives the contract, and then Findorf is also, you were Findorf, right?
That's correct.
And how can you be our representative and also represent Findorf?
Well, that's
on change orders and whether things are being done correctly at that stage of the game and that sort of thing.
Sure, and that's a fair question.
You must get that question.
Yes, we do. And just so we know, it's Matt. Brian is behind us too. He's also with Findorf, so I'll take my stab at it. And if he feels to add something, he's welcome to as well. But
it seems like you're an insider.
Yeah, no, you're totally, I can see where it would seem that way. Yes, we,
I think it is, isn't it?
well, we haven't really reached the stage yet where Findorf is doing the work. We've reached the stage where Findorf is hired as the construction manager. And so we still have to, that's what we talk about with alternative delivery methods. So on a number of projects we work on, Findorf, we will come and present on the difference and the positives and drawbacks potentially of Findorf actually physically putting a hammer in their hand and putting walls up and actually bidding that out to subcontractors. So that's something we address down the road, but as of right now, we're the construction manager and we want to give you the most information to make that decision. I would say, and I think I know I'm very proud of working for Findorf because most of our work happens with repeat clients. And that only happens because we are transparent and we are open with everything we do. And I would stack pretty much all of our references up on the table and have you guys call a lot of other districts and see if they would say the same. But you're right, at the early stages, if I just came out and said, hey, Dean, I'd like to get all this work, that might seem a little bit weird. But that is a process that we'll talk about in the future. As the CM, we're going to give you both sides of the table. We've already actually started talking about this with Dan a little bit. What's the difference between a construction manager and a general contractor? A construction manager is somebody that you, as the district, hire for your best interest. A general contractor actually will put in the work. And it's sometimes we, as a construction manager, will hire ourselves in some trades to do that. In some cases, it's bid out, but that's all being directed by the district. I cannot hire myself without the district's approval.
I'll add to that too. I think, we talk about transparency and open book. So as a construction manager, everything that we're doing is open to you to see exactly what's happening from a financial standpoint and what isn't. So when Peter talks about a general contractor, you go out to bid, and the number is what the number is, and they're looking to get, maximize their fee. Our fee has been established through a competitive qualifications-based selection process. That's how you hired us. And so if we go through the process of, let's say, masonry, for example, and we bid the masonry, if we're not low, then somebody else gets the masonry. If we are low, and a change comes about that, scope is added, that has to be reviewed by the architect, and they have to agree to the cost as well as the district. So it's all sort of out there and wide open. We welcome an audit. We welcome, questions from Jared, all of that throughout the entire process. So there is, our goal is, and Peter talked about our reputation. At the end of the day, from a practical business standpoint, that means more to us than anything that's written to a contract. And so, when we talk about openness and transparency and how we do our business, that really is what has allowed us to be successful for 128 years now. And, it's our job, Peter and mine, to carry that torch forward. So it means a lot to how we do our business.
Okay. Actually, before you go on, could you do me a favor and first of all just describe your fee schedule for us, agreed upon, because just so we have. It's been a while since I've seen anybody here has seen it. Do you guys recall what it is?
I don't know.
Okay.
Actually, but I can pull it up because I got something today that would.
Okay. I can't find the RFP. That's why I'm asking.
It's on Board Docs, the RFP is.
The most recent one?
Yeah.
I mean, is that for construction management?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and the other thing is, if you mentioned it, last time we built a building, we used a general contractor. If you would describe the difference, the way you do difference between a construction manager and a general contractor, because your roles are different.
Yes, very much different. Matt started with a good example. I'll finish with that one and just take it a little bit further. So masonry, for example, as a construction manager, we could set, if it's directed to us, we would set out for bid to a bunch of masonry contractors, general contractors. So Findorf might bid on that. You might get a couple other contractors to bid on that. We would evaluate those bids. We would look through them with the architect, look for the lowest, most qualified bid. We would present those bids to the district to review and ultimately select. We just did this process at a number of schools. Sometimes we're the low, sometimes we're not. So once that contractor is selected, that contractor would represent like the general contractor in that case. And so sometimes we end up hiring ourselves, sometimes we don't. The difference is that for general contractors, it's a hard bid. The price is what it is. There's no negotiation, and we don't know what they have in their number or what they don't have. And then when changes arise that eventually they do, they would expect to be compensated for that. As a CM, as your partner, as we would try to do some of that self-perform work, any of the savings is shared. So in a hard bid scenario, a general contractor, if I'm bidding to a city municipality or something, I bid a hard bid, and maybe I had something wrong, but I was a low bidder and I saved a bunch of money, that ends up going back into the general contractor.
Explain hard bid. I'm assuming there's a soft bid too?
I would say hard bid versus negotiated is probably the best way to do it. The middle ground is probably a little bit more of a heavy negotiation, I would say, but a hard bid is where, so the construction management process was an RFP. You hired us based on a proposal and an interview, and we were selected. Hard bid is where you give us a picture, a drawing, and you say, put a number at this, and we submit this much dollars. So right now the budget says $33.5 million for a new elementary school. Let's say the drawings were complete, you'd send that out to everybody, to every general contractor, and each general contractor would put a number at that. So that's a hard bid, whereas negotiated would not be. You would negotiate for a fee, just like you did for the CM, and say this is the fee, any savings go back to the districts, and this is the guaranteed maximum price, you can't go over this price.
And by the way, we have, in terms of when it comes to our steel and our masonry and the work that Findorf does self-perform, we have no preference as to which delivery method the district would allow us to go. We don't advocate for one or the other. It's completely up to you. We've been successful in either processes. So there's a little bit of a, I think, confusion here because you think about a general contractor that's sort of state hard bid situation. Their objective is to maximize their fee per plans, per specs, no more, no less. There's no really service-oriented work to be done there. It's blocks and mortar, and that's it, right? In the K-12 world that we work in some situations, the districts ask us to bid all of the work that we self-perform, in which case we're just like the flooring guy, we're just like the electrician. In other scenarios, there are efficiencies in terms of equipment and labor across trades with concrete, masonry, etc. And there are savings, any dollars that are not spent go back to the district underneath that guaranteed maximum price. But that is a conversation that we'll have here in the next several months, and that's ultimately up to you, the district, to make that decision. We advocate for neither of those. It's entirely up to you.
And then one last question. Typically when you're building schools, about what percentage of the work do you end up self-performing? Is there a typical number, or is it all over the place?
So I'm gonna sort of guesstimate that on 80% of the projects we self-perform most of our labor, because we have these conversations. So most districts elect for us to self-perform. Of a typical project, about 13% is our labor for just the work that we perform, and that is the concrete and steel and really the areas of a project that drive the schedule. So it's just 13% of the overall cost. The structural steel, for example, that would still be competitively bid. The blocks and more, the concrete, the rebar, all of that, the materials in which we put in place, that's all competitively bid as well. And our labor can be competitively bid as well. It's, and then you're down to just the project management and supervision to make sure that things are happening the way they should be.
I misspoke, I apologize.
Yeah,
The RFP is there, not the
proposal is not
proposal.
there. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So how do you decide who gets the bid? Because as everybody knows, low bid isn't always best bid.
No.
And secondly, Mike, do we have any standards? I don't, does that come from us, or like I would like my $33 million building to stay standing, so I would not have any interest in working with a non-union shop.
Sure.
Or I'd love to work with people local, especially Monona Grove graduates if they're in the ballpark. So I don't know how does all that stuff play into it.
Great question. So the quick answer is that it's the lowest, most qualified bid. A lot of my past history is, as a general contractor and as a CM, we have some good and bad experiences with subcontractors. And so when we sit down at the table, we'll have a spreadsheet and we'll sit down with Dan and the team and say, here's the 7 bidders we got for flooring. Here's the 2 lowest bidders. This one is maybe struggling right now, or this one's great, we've worked with them before and there's no issues, or this guy's maybe a little high, but he's local, and then maybe that's a decision. So we evaluate all those decisions as a team, and ultimately the board will get to, not the board, sorry, the district, as a district will get to decide on that. So it is the lowest, most qualified, and it's not always just the lowest bid. And that's the beauty of the construction management process. We have a lot of experience with a lot of these subcontractors. And some of that even starts before we send it out to bid, and working with the district on, okay, here's the list of people we recommend sending it out to because we get the best response. We also know these are quality contractors. And also there might be, this is a list of local contractors or graduates or alumni. We also look at what the best time of year is. That's why he said it's a little flexible there for a spring start. Sometimes we'll look at our pre-construction department and say, wow, there's a lot of bids going out this month. Let's move ours to the month either before or after that. And so it gives us some flexibility. So ultimately, we're just advising you, giving you the best information to make the decision. It may not always be the lowest qualified bidder.
Peter? So Dan and Jared, let me just make sure I understand this. So in the previous construction at Glacial Drumlin, we had a gentleman named Mike Huffman, and his title actually was owner's representative. Or at least that's how it comes up in the minutes for the construction project. So are we as a board, and we've already approved this, that Findorf is in fact our owner representative in this project? Do I have those words right?
So you have to define an owner's rep in terms of exactly what you want that role to be. An owner's rep can be a lot of different things.
Right.
And so I'll give you an example for state construction. When the DFD has representatives that oversee and facilitate a hard bid situation because you need someone to advocate against subcontractors when they're asking for change orders. That's a role we play. You need someone to make sure that the schedule's staying on track. That's the role that we play. So a lot of what DFD does in that situation as an owner's rep for the state, that's the role we play as a construction manager, as an advocate for you. Now, we worked with Mike Huffman and very successfully. He's a great guy and lives in the same community I live in, and so I know him well. So he has, when districts have a need for an owner's rep and specify what exactly that means, he's a great resource. But you have to understand what it is you're asking for. And I think the important thing is to really understand what EUA's role is, what Findorf's role is, and then what benefit you get for the cost of an owner's rep in terms of the expectations you have for that person. And from what I understand at Glacial Drumlin, you bid out the project, you had a general contractor, and Mike's job was to oversee them. This is a different situation. That's not to say, again, I won't advocate against or for an owner's rep in this situation. I just think you need to understand what you'd be paying for and what you're expecting in that situation. If that makes sense.
So at least for me, I think it's going to be really important to get that clarity so that we don't have expectations from the community on past projects in terms of that advocacy versus the contractual advocacy we're doing now. Because it's not fair to you to say, well, I really expected, I mean, that, Dean, wasn't that kind of what you were saying? That this is somebody with no conflicts of interest who worked for us. But that's basically what you're saying. So I'm not sure I clearly see the differences there.
Yeah.
I guess the only way is to pull up Mike's.
So a couple of differences is, it actually is a complete different process that we're going through with this new proposal than our previous one. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was just based on my information and previous research, is that we hired, the district just hired an architect who really designed the building, gave us all the cost estimates, and then went out to bid and got a general contractor. At the same time, you received an owner's rep to monitor that. We brought around, and when we issued the RFP, we were very specific on the items of duties that we want the CM to do when it comes to construction. A lot of those duties were very similar to what an owner's rep would do, is managing the subcontractors, managing change orders, assisting with pay schedules, qualifying the bids. So what has been nice is that the CM has been along the whole project. So from my point of view, is obviously there's always a lot of work. If we didn't have a CM in now, when we went and hired a construction manager, I would highly encourage you to hire an owner's rep, because I need assistance to make sure those change orders that are coming through are accurate change orders, and that we are not completely changing the direction that's going to add more costs to the budget. The other part of it is that as we sit here tonight and we talk about making sure we understand what this new school looks like for our community, the CM who's going to be directing the subcontractors is hearing the conversation that each and every one of you are having from day one, versus an owner's rep coming on after you have developed the construction documents, but that might not be. So they are there truly as an advocate. What's been nice about, so we've worked with Findorf this past year on our summer capital budgets, and they showed us their bidding process, and it's extremely transparent. We also did that with C.G. Schmidt a couple years before that. Theirs is transparent as well. But what we like about it is everything is really back to the district to determine who is going to do the work. So as they talk about, they perhaps could do 80% of the labor. That's still our decision to allow them to do that or not. We, and obviously if they're going to bid out anything, they're going to submit the bids to us ahead of time, and then everybody else will submit their bids for the following day. What's nice is being able to have them walk through, similar to what an owner's rep would do, is they would help qualify some of those bids as well. They say, you know what, you received these are the lowest ones, however, these people are local. And that's what Findorf will still do. However, their numbers might be incorporated in there, but that's for us to decide as a district if we want to continue to offer that. Having the opportunity when we were writing the RFP, reaching out to many of the districts in Dane County, and what they've done is they've moved away from those owners rep because they brought CMs on sooner, versus like Middleton, Cross Plains, DeForest, Wanakee, they've all went through that CM concept, and so they've moved away from the owner's rep. So I believe they are providing some of those services. They're not just going to sit at the table and only, where an owner's rep is just going to advocate strictly for us. They're going to be able to bring in a lot of background that has been through this entire process, and be able to assist us with those change orders and making sure that the contracts are being issued. And then as we work with our attorneys to finalize all their contracts, it really then goes back for us to have Findorf, like we have a building that needs to open up in 2 weeks. Sometimes getting a subcontractor to come back in those 2 weeks because the building's open, we can then rely on Findorf because they do perform that. They can come in and fix that, and then we can work with that subcontractor to either reduce their contract amount or how much we would have paid because we're holding back contingencies, versus having an owner's rep. They don't necessarily provide services. So now where we're at is the owner's rep is working on our behalf, but they can't technically come in and perform the work. So sometimes we just need to get the work done because we have a deadline that we have to get students in that building, where having a CM on board does allow us to tap into that, but it also allows us, as we've heard through some of the listening sessions before, like, your projects always come in over. Well, that's because nothing against NARCA. They're just using square foot, what they believe is out there. Is the CM is using past practices, past projects and active projects that will allow them to really get us closer into that dollar amount ahead of time, versus us being reactive, so it's being more proactive.
So do you feel that there's anything that we are specifically not receiving by not having an owner's rep?
I don't believe so. I mean, I'm confident in this situation, but
I would like to direct the RFP, our proposal that we put together when we accepted when we were looking for a construction manager for processes attached to the 9 board docs. I'd urge everybody to review that. I haven't seen it in a year or whatever, however long it's been. Everybody review that. The other thing I would ask you, if you could attach their response that we received from them so that we understand where they are at that.
Here's the other thing.
And
don't
hang on a second. Response to that. At our next meeting, if we want to have a discussion about the relationship, we can do that, because then we've all looked through that and we can have a discussion about the relationship. I think it might be a good thing to do, to have a discussion about the relationship.
Okay, so the other thing I think we need to have is my covenants previous, but here's the person who's going to be sitting in the chair in the hot seat, and it's critically important to me to hear Jared's opinion about, are there any things that you anticipate a support piece that if you had an owner's rep, you feel you would have. You just elaborated some really nice points about things you will get from having Findorf be the construction manager. Are there any points that we should know about that might be issues by not having an owner's rep?
I mean, obviously I can think some more of it. I mean, what I do think with an owner's rep, it does give the ability for the district to go to one person. However, I don't think that's always the best thing. So like right now, as EUA is working on our HVAC and plumbing, you know, we've worked with McKinstry for a long time. So we could tap into Honeywell and McKinstry and get their advice on what's potentially being developed and proposed to us versus just going to one individual that is expected to be an expert in everything. That's the only thing that's coming to my mind right now, but I think it's actually a benefit to us being able to reach into all of our long-term relationship vendors and say, hey, this is what's being proposed. What are you thinking here? Does this work into what you've seen happening here? Because they really have more of a history with the district versus us going out and just hiring. I mean, we might hire the same person if we went with an owner's rep, but we also might hire someone who has no relationship with the district, that has to take a lot of time to get up to speed to understand what are all those systems in place and where is our community coming from. But I mean, those are the only things instantly that I could think of. I mean, obviously, I could explore more and just verify and look at previous contracts.
Just any thoughts that you have?
From what I see, the construction manager, it fulfills the roles of the owner's rep.
Mm-hmm.
Those things that I'm familiar with and recall from the prior process. Plus, plus you have additional responsibilities on that further on than that. It does sound like the relationship will be more flexible because really the owner's rep, with a construction manager, with a general contractor, he goes out and does the subcontractors. We don't have any say on that. He gets what it is. And the owner's rep in this case, he's looking at the construction day to day and making sure that we're getting what we're paying for. There's a nice bright line though, that he's only being paid he only gets paid by the board to do that construction. He has no interest in how much the building costs and so on, and those things. So there's a nice bright line there. But it sounds like we have here those roles will be filled both by Findorf, plus we have additional flexibility in the process going forward.
The reason I raised the question, Peter and Jared, and I may be wrong on this, my recollection may be wrong, but I believe when the high school was built, there was an architect, there was a Findorf, there was EUA and a Findorf, and I believe the district hired a third party independent that had no role in the general contract, that supervised the construction, did the things that you were describing, but also supervised the construction project to assure the same materials that were presumed to be done, or that shortcuts were not being made, or the subcontractors, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't have a lot of information or details on it, but I felt in that situation the party was a third party, which
that's what we're talking about with Mike.
Yeah, I know.
For the Glacial Drumlin, that's exactly the same thing we did.
Okay.
This is much recent. It was the same thing with the high school. The district had a general contractor rather than a construction manager, and then an owner's representative. But now essentially we didn't have a Findorf then. We've got somebody. Findorf here is in a different role than Vogel Brothers was with Glacial Drumlin, and who was it with the high school? Anybody remember? Okay. But we have a different role. We didn't have a Findorf then. We've got a different role today.
But Dean's point is excellent, and that is we have to be responsible to our community, and I appreciate that the bidding process is transparent. But if we have basically an owner's rep, generally on its face, if Findorf picks a Findorf bid, even if we approve it, we've got to seriously, beyond being transparent, be able to individually justify that as we go forward. And again, I've been working with Findorf before you guys were born. So, I mean, the history there is great, and the quality is excellent. It's going to be how it could look. And I have Jared there, so I'm not too worried.
I think it's important, just for the sake of this meeting and semantics, Findorf doesn't pick bids. I know it's probably not how you intended it, but I want to make sure it's very clear to everybody. We do not pick the
So
bids.
you bring every bid you get to us?
I bring them all to the district.
Not to us,
I bring them to the district. I'll sit down with Dan. I've done this at every project. I'll sit down with the owner and I'll say, here's the 8 bidders we got in electrical. Obviously these 4 are way high. You're good with this? And then we'll look at the bidders and we'll say, this is what they all have. I'll go through the whole spreadsheet, every single thing, what's good, what's bad. And I'll say, what decision do you want to make? I just did this in my last 2 districts, and in some cases, the district said, I have no idea, you guys should help us with this one. In some cases, we have a really strong relationship with this roofer or this mechanical contractor. And so, really, we are presenting the bids. We scope them, we make sure that all the bids are equal, but then we bring them equal, not dollar-wise, but that they all have everything in the drawings that they need. Because ultimately, we're holding these contracts. And if the numbers go up, that's bad for us. And we don't want to bring those costs to you, so we try to manage that early on. So once again, just clarify, we don't pick the bids. We send it out for bids, we qualify the bids, and we present the bids to the district.
I think my point's being missed, though. I appreciate everything you said about bidding and that sort of thing. It seems to me that I may not have the right words, but it's the actual construction management to assure that the specifications and the bids are being done, the change orders and all that kind of thing. And I believe that was the role in which, at least as I recall from the high school, is that there were at least 2 or 3 times that I learned. I learned through the grapevine because I wasn't on the board at that time, that sort of thing. So that's a kind of different role. I'll call it an inspection and quality assurance.
I think we have an answer for that.
Rather than a bid. And now I'm sure you do, because you've worked with us guys before.
Well, so as the architect, we're putting those documents together and we're basically giving Findorf a set of instructions on the material to use and how it should be constructed. It's my job to make sure that they're building it per plans and specs. And I can tell you that if it isn't, again, that's my job to tell Peter, hey, this isn't per our plans and specs.
Are you going to be on the project while it's being built?
We're not on every single day. We don't do, we do construction observations.
And everything, as a part of the process, any questions asked have to go to the design team. Anytime that we want to submit, so let's say we want to provide a paint, we say this is the paint we want to use. They make sure it matches with the specification. We can't put anything in the building unless it has been approved by the architect.
If they submit a toilet fixture or a faucet that doesn't meet our specification, it's rejected and they have to resubmit.
And vice versa. I think the flip side to that accountability relationship, and this is what Jared was talking about, is let's say I wanted to submit to you a nice big change order for something. That gets reviewed by the architect. He'll say, no, that's in the drawings. You can't do that. And he'll communicate that to Jared. So you've hired both of us to not only advocate and support for you, but you've covered both of us to keep each other accountable. I'm here to tell you and tell Bob, hey, you missed this in the drawings, and he's here to tell me this is what it should be or not.
Same thing with the process that we're in now. As we go through design, we're talking about budget. Peter might say, hey, we're looking at this, this seems way out of whack from a price standpoint, and I might say, well, you're looking at that wrong, or hey, great, thanks for pointing that out, how can we come up with a better solution? So there is a checks and balance between the two of us. We are reviewing the pay applications as well, to make sure, if we're 25% through the project and they're billing 100% for something that hasn't even started yet, that's a problem. And that's something that we, the architect, UA, needs to advise the owner of. Or we'll just go back and, But that is what you are paying EUA to do as well.
One other comment, just that this is not unique to K-12, by the way.
Right.
This is a very standard practice delivery method for all our private clients. It's a vast majority of the work that we do and our competition does in Wisconsin. So it's very, very common practice.
I made my point. I'm done.
Okay. Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, and we're going to see a lot of you.
Yes, thank you.
I was actually here. I was having a chat with my neighbor who was a former director of the Bureau of Engineering for the state, and he said, who are you working with? I said, we've hired Findorf, and he says, I don't have anything bad to say about this place.
All right.
Did he have anything good to say?
Yes, he did. He said, they're a great firm, so you did the right thing. That was very reassuring to hear that from him. All right, forgive me for a minute. I've been looking at too many documents here, and I've lost my board docs. There we go. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Getting on with the superintendent's report.
Okay, 2 items I'd like to report out on this evening. First is with regard to our healthcare benefits committee. We just had our second meeting last night, and so if you checked board docs earlier in the week, we just attached meeting minutes today, so they're posted on there, as well as a financial overview. And since we just posted it today, we also distributed a hard copy of the financial piece that Jared put together. So one of the questions that came up at our very first committee meeting, a legitimate question, from our staff, is, well, what incentive do we have to look at any possible plan changes? We like our benefits that we have, and why wouldn't we keep those? And that's a great question. And so the answer is, well, money. And so what Jared has put together, and he can answer the details on it, but it's basically showing over the last 5 years what our actual district costs have been on an annual basis for health insurance premiums. And that's the district cost. And so you'll notice back in 2016, there was very minimal increase of less than 1%, and that was the year that we changed plans and we bid out, and so that was great, and that was part of the process. And then the next year, an increase of just under 8%, and we had guaranteed maximums increase in premiums of, I believe, just under 7%, but we also had a few more people come on the plan, so the actual cost went up. And then we had something unexpected happen this past year, is a significant increase of number of employees who joined the plan. Those were not new employees. We didn't increase staff at all. It's just people who previously had not been on the plan, had, through our open enrollment period, joined on. So
and
they said,
families, specifically the family.
And that was a piece as well.
Yes. Dramatic in the increased cost.
Number of people, correct, in family plans. So, so clearly we cannot continue to have 12% increases in health insurance premiums. And so we talked about the process. I'll let Jared maybe add a little bit to the detail about the budget piece of it, and then make sure we're all clear on that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what the committee discussed and the process that we're going to go through in the next year and a half. Remember, our renewal is not until January 1 of 2020. So actually just over a year, but we're in this planning process. So Jared, on the financial piece, anything you'd like to?
Yeah, and I know Dan had stated this, but the $6,067,000 is just the district portion of health insurance that we're being budgeted for this year. And so that actually represented a $682,000 increase over last year's health insurance actual expenditures. So last year we had $5,384,000. And so that's where it represents that 12.7% increase over last year. And what we were explaining to the Health Insurance Committee is, obviously with new money that the district received, we received just over $1 million. This ate up like 68% of that new money. And obviously it was a surprise because we only budgeted for an 8% increase. The insurance increase from the insurance carriers met our cap. However, we saw over 20 individuals join our plan that wasn't predicted, and we didn't hire 20 new positions. You could say, well, if you hire new positions that were never on your health insurance plan before, obviously that's going to inflate it, and that makes sense. However, the 20 individuals that came onto our plan have been in the district for a number of years. But we also showed that we had 86 single plans last year. We're down to 78. And we had 293 family plans last year, and we're up to 320. So when we start looking at those dollar amounts, that had a really large impact to our budget. The one thing that was pointed out last night is that there is some data points that are not included in 17, 18, 16, 17, 15, 16. So some of this data is stuff that we don't necessarily keep data collect this data on, but it's good data to have, and so we will start doing it forward. And as time allows, we'll go back. But just being able to answer, like, so we currently have 482 positions in our district. That's not counting lifeguards. That's not counting, coaches. These are 482 positions that we classify as, between teachers, administration, educational assistant, custodials. Of those 482 positions, 459 positions are actually eligible for benefits. So that's 95% of all of our positions are offered for benefits. And we actually have an 87% participation rate, which I think is great. And so that makes us, we have to ask questions. Why? Not saying that's a bad thing, but we just have to understand why are we starting to see more and more individuals potentially that have been working in the district for a number of years leave their spouse's plan. And some of it could be because of retirement. We know that happens. But there are individuals that are mid-career that are choosing. An example is the city of Madison made some changes to their firefighters' health insurance fund, and they've incorporated large deductibles and premium increases. And so some of those individuals, and there are districts that are making changes like adding deductibles. And so then those families are switching over to ours because we potentially have a better plan. Not saying that any of that's right or wrong, but I think it's a data point that we need to be closer to watching, especially when we're starting to budget. And as Eric mentioned, we hopefully can get $200 increase, but if we're only getting $1 million of new money each year, and we're already going through a zero-based budgeting, and we're taking our health insurance and we're eating up, 65% of it, that's a pretty small amount that we can shift over to the salaries. And as the personnel committee has talked about, retain and attract, like we need to increase our salaries, and we talked about if we did do a shift in health insurance, how can we take some of that money and put back into salaries? Well, we're starting to go underwater. We need to lower it and then lower it again to be able to shift that money to be able to free up and add new positions for keeping class sizes low and increase. So that was pretty much, and this is obviously the second meeting this go around, as Aaron mentioned. So,
Dean?
A question. Your description of the it appeared like your description of this, it seemed to be the data that you used were numbers of people joining and perhaps people taking family plans and stuff like that. Is everything to do with state or federal policies on health coverage or Obamacare or those kind of things? Are they affecting this?
Well, I think it would answer our problem if we had federal or universal health care, that the district wasn't necessarily having to provide 100% of that. That definitely has an impact on it since we don't have that. But I don't think right now there's any state or federal policy that's necessarily driving for our positions, because our positions, like I said, 95% of all of our positions are eligible for health insurance, and so those individuals.
So it's unique to our district as far as you can see at this point.
Yep. So we just have to ask some questions, and doesn't mean that, like I said before, it's right or wrong or good or bad. It's just we have to understand a little bit more in depth, why are we potentially, you could call it a magnet for health insurance, but it's ultimately going back to talk about total compensation. So we could be fine with keeping our benefit level here, but then when we talk about salaries, we just need to make sure that we look at the whole picture. We're not just saying, oh, look how low we're on salaries, and we forget about the benefit side of things.
So that can, just maybe repeating myself, it seems to me that your report is indicating that this is a local phenomena, and is it fundamentally with our staff or with some others that you have some case studies information on that you're receiving?
I believe I can say yes to that.
Yeah.
That's a tricky question, Dean.
Our participation rates are higher than most other districts. So bottom line is, we've had two meetings. The first meeting was a lot of time spent on looking at the comparable data. So our committee members all really understand well what our plan design is compared to other districts, and so on. And then we had this discussion about, the budget implications, and then the process moving forward. So in the next 3 months, we work with Al Yeager from Affiliated. We'll be working on putting out, RFPs, or actually
Eyes.
Or RFIs, request for information, right, it's information. But anyways, working with the providers and to come back then to the committee in March, okay, with different plan options to consider. Ultimately, Jared and I are going to need to bring a recommendation to this board for January 1, 2020. We want the committee to drive that process so that if we have to recommend some plan or some changes, we want them fully vetted by the committee and based upon their recommendations.
This is an extension of what you and I talked about.
Yep. The committee's talked about, even though they are very well informed, we talked about the idea of in certain things, might we want to survey staff. That is something they may look at doing as well, when we get the data because we talked about, things like you can lower premiums by increasing co-pays or adding, or I should say, we don't have any right now, adding or increasing deductibles, employee contributions. Those are all different ways of lowering the district costs. And so we'll look to the committee to help guide us, and if we have to do some of those things, which direction should we go? So really we looked at, there are 4 factors that drive our costs. The plan design, okay, the contribution level of our employees, the eligibility of our employees, okay? The standard that most districts have is that employees must work a minimum of 30 hours a week to be eligible. Ours are far below that. That is one factor that this committee will not discuss. That's not the type of thing that they should have to make recommendations about, their colleagues and so on. But it is something the board will discuss. And then lastly, wellness initiatives. Are there some things that we can do to help drive down, premium costs? So they'll fully vet all those different things here in the next, few months. We'll continue to report back to the board during that process, and like I said, ultimately bring forth a recommendation or recommendations for the board to consider. Possibly as early as June. For sure, by the end of the summer, we'd have to make some decisions.
Dean?
I was just going to add that.
I'm sorry, Dean. I said Dean.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's already spoken.
I'm sorry, he had his hand up first.
Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Because I think it goes with your question, but one of the things I wanted to make sure, because we've talked about this in personnel, and I think we need to talk about the general concepts more. One thing was,
I didn't think the minutes reflected, there was a clear request for a survey of the staff because of the variety of staff people in the group. And that basically they're different. And they said, we're different, so we want to make sure we're all equally represented. And one individual spoke repeatedly about if we do things that reduce the cost to the district, and we put that into salary, so is that what people want? So do you want to, so we pay 95% of the health insurance, and we are right, Jared, the only district?
No. Madison.
How many of us pay 95% in Dane County?
In Dane County, it would be us in Madison that will have, and then everybody else's.
Madison pays 95%?
Madison pays,
97.
right, I don't know.
Pays what?
I think it's 97, or 95, 97.
When I say Madison,
Do you have
they're
a
at
choice of
equal
plans?
or,
We have a choice of 2.
Okay. So again, it was how much do you pay? Choice of plans. Would you take, again, higher copays? So it might be helpful if the board wants to see those other great resource documents, the one that Al gave us on the other school districts to show. I mean, effectively, the only copay we have, right, is the $60 in the ER.
yes.
Yep.
Everything else is paid for, and we pay 95% of the insurance. And we had an increase in family plan, which is another 30% higher than the individual, or 40.
Yeah, so our family plan is $18,655 compared to $74.92.
And you have a choice of 2 plans. That background, again. Those are really good documents for personnel.
Yeah. I think we had
Yeah,
those.
we
We
should-
got those.
Oh, okay.
A couple of meetings ago, they were,
Yeah.
after you
The
first
big-
talked about them personnel, yeah, it was
the
in
long
Word
one?
docs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have that, yeah.
But we'll make sure we share them out again when the board considers
Okay.
this. Yeah.
But we're planning on a committee meeting on that.
So I want to be clear that this committee, these are our, and we have all groups represented on the committee, you know, teachers and the various support staff groups, because it affects everyone's insurance and everyone's benefit. And so they're really our staff members that are our best experts on this, that will help us, and again, perhaps through staff surveys as well as their own expertise, as far as helping make recommendations about if we have to make any changes. The Personnel Committee, I think, has a little bit different role in looking at that balance between salary and benefits and how that, you know, factors in. And obviously the whole board has, you know, together we have to work through those. But this committee will focus on the insurance benefits because, you know, they won't get into the discussion about shifting from benefits to salary, because all the different groups are part of that, and that's really a different role.
Dan, are teacher representatives on the health committee, are they represented also on the personnel committee, or is that two different groups?
They are not the teachers that traditionally have shown up for our meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Jeff?
when we're balancing the cost of the health insurance with salaries, obviously if we add deductibles and all this other stuff, that's a pay cut. So you're going to start out cutting their salary to raise it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Transferring from.
Right. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul is another.
Right.
Right. So one way or another, they're going to pay. I
Yeah.
mean, so.
You know, the question is I'm surprised to see the numbers of the increase in the number of people who are on the plan and how that is driving our costs. And it's because our costs for them are lower than for most other employers. And so what it means is that if there are two employers, if there's two employees in the family, two teachers even, one's in a different district, they're going to choose ours. We'll be subsidizing the other employer because we have more than other people, because we have a more generous plan. And it's not clear to me what the right answer to that is.
Which would be part of the retain.
Yeah,
part,
exactly.
If we have the best.
People are dependent on their plans.
Right.
Plus, we have choice. A lot of those plans,
We're starting to move to one provider.
they only have one choice.
It's kind of hard to have one provider in Madison with 3 hospitals.
Isn't anymore.
What's that?
It isn't
I
anymore.
mean, there's 2 from Madison. We only really had one option because we had to go to UW. So we had to go with GHC.
Right.
The other one was really not an option. So.
Okay.
What's that?
So here, they have 2 options.
2 options
Right.
in Madison.
Right.
But for someone like myself,
Yeah.
I could only go to UW.
Yeah.
I work with 27 different doctors. I
Yeah.
couldn't change those all over to
Yeah.
Dean. It'd be
So
nuts.
if they chose Dean only,
Right.
which a lot of school districts do, again, that sheet is great because it shows you kind of what the choices have been.
Dean, well, I don't know. The Dean has a relationship with UW for.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that's
There's
right. That's why you have a
there's no
committee, though.
direct referral.
That's why you have a committee,
Yeah,
right?
to weigh all that, because it is very difficult. I mean, you have
It
to look
is
at how many
difficult.
people
I
have
would make a statement.
Dean, how many people have you. I mean, you have
Al's
to.
not here.
Yeah, you have to look at all that. There are a lot of things.
Dan, do you have any more for the report?
On the healthcare. So,
Okay.
all right. Second piece, much more brief. Facilities. The high school stadium renovation fundraising. So we talked about this a couple board meetings ago. Okay, since that time, we've had the foundation, MGF, has had 2 meetings and has had some discussion. The last meeting, extensive discussion about if we were to move forward with this project, would the foundation be interested in playing a role? And it was a good discussion about even, we have a lot of people on that board that have done a lot of fundraising over the years in different organizations, and some things for us to consider, as we move forward. So no decisions have been made at this point. We're really gathering information and about this. But so at the beginning, initially with the pre-referendum, we were looking at funding the track replacement only. And so we had the idea that we really would like to be able to add the synthetic turf as well. And as well as perhaps some additional stadium improvements. And so right away, we talked about the idea of perhaps doing some fundraising. Once we shifted to funding both the track and the field with referendum dollars, we still haven't given up on the idea of the additional stadium improvements, but clearly the need is not as high as there would have been for the other piece. So what we want, we've still been exploring the idea, is that feasible? Is that something our community will support? Do we want to move forward with a capital campaign? And so we've really been kind of doing that information gathering this last month or so. The foundation is interested in participating, but not being in an active role necessarily of going out and trying to solicit funds, but being an avenue perhaps of holding the funds and kind of a pass-through type thing. Again, none of this is final. That's just kind of the discussion that's taken place at this point. So the other thing that we did, and I just added this today in the board docs, we had a meeting last week with all the key staff members who would be involved with the stadium. We met with the varsity soccer coaches, the varsity track coaches and football, and our high school administrative team to make sure that they have full understanding of the scope of the project through the referendum, and then this concept of some additional enhancements to the stadium, increased capacity, press box, fencing, entrance gates, that sort of thing. And they were very positive about, yes, they, for their program, saw that as a worthwhile endeavor to pursue that as well. So we left it is that we said everything we talked about, none of that is confidential. Please go out and feel free to share these ideas with your parents, your boosters, and so on, and start looking at the idea of, okay, who might be involved in assisting you with this kind of a capital campaign. So what we have, there's been no decisions. Based upon the feedback that I've gotten through the foundation and looking at what some other school districts have done, it appears the route to go would be to create a committee with a chair or co-chairs of, it could be community members. They might have a relationship with the school, but we need a group that is really going to take charge of doing this. Anything that we come up with, understand, we'll come back to this board for approval before we start dollar of fundraising, but as far as the approach, it's certainly something that Jared doesn't have time to coordinate, our school staff on their own, the foundation, that we really would need a dedicated group of individuals that were willing to take this on. So I did put it as an attachment on board docs, one school district that is doing something similar, not that we would follow exactly how they were doing it, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of the approach. Where in New Richmond, where they're doing a similar project where it's basically a new stadium, there are some district funds towards it, and then the remainder they're trying to do through a capital campaign. And so that kind of concept is I think, the direction we should go. Tonight, what I'm looking for is just any, again, additional feedback on your thoughts on that. Like I said, ultimately, as we pull this together, it comes to the board, for approval of a plan before we start any actual fundraising. But that's the work that we've done essentially the last month, the discussions that we've had. So, looking for your thoughts.
Dean?
Yeah, Kev, have you gone as far as the amount of money that would be needed?
We have those.
In the preliminary stuff, we had kind of broad figures,
That's a really good question. And so, no, we do need to get more detailed with that. So we have the preliminary figures that Findorf gave us without doing any real design was the additional projects approximately $2 million. With the 1.5 we have for the track and the field, and then if we did all new bleachers, new press box, new fencing, entrance gates, storage, all that together would be approximately $2 million. If we're going to move forward, we need to have a more definite number. We need to have conceptual drawings and so on. And so that scope as well is something that we need to talk about. Are all those enhancements what we really want to go for, or scale down a little bit?
So Dan, I'm still, a little bit confused about the project in that it sounds like a great idea. And you've said it's not coming from you, but you're the one who's pulling together all the threads and the pieces with your time. I mean, you're meeting with MGF twice. You're meeting with all the coaches, and actually, we've had a pretty strong history of plan design for that high school field with a variety of different things that we need to be upgraded. But, you know, if Jeff pulls those minutes, he can already tell you that. So I'm just wondering exactly what the expectation is for kind of your involvement in this project going forward, or where that advocacy group is going to.
Yeah. Thank you. Great question. What I'm hoping is, right now, to kind of pull this together, it is a team effort. It's not just myself. It's Jared, it's Paul Gross, Jeff Schreiner, all of us together.
It's our district.
You know, yeah, but then ultimately, if we're going to move forward, we really need that strong committee to do all the legwork. And then to kind of hand off, where then our role would be more the monitoring of it moving forward. But to get it started, it really has got to be kind of our team.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I think we should add the tennis courts to that, personally.
I was sitting here wondering the same thing.
Yeah.
If that was
Otherwise,
possible.
you're gonna drain people of money, and the tennis courts are gonna still sit there.
And they're never gonna get
We should
done.
probably fix those.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. We've actually we talked about that at that meeting we had with our staff, our coaches, and that's something we need to decide. In theory, I'd like to say the tennis courts are a need, just like the track was, that we really should be using district funds and shouldn't have to fundraise for. However, we don't have district funds.
That's not the reality.
So that's the dilemma. So I would definitely be open to that, and that'd be the type of thing that the board could decide if we wanted to
Well, I like what
include that.
New Richmond does. We need 1.7 million here. Once we
Just
get
let it out,
90%, then
it's very-
the district.
Yeah, the
will take
different
the rest.
phases, yeah.
Because the district has to pay something, because as we know, fundraising means the same few families pay for everybody's stuff, but it's gonna benefit everybody, so everybody needs to kick in at the end.
Yeah. But I agree, whatever the scope is, if we add that in there, I think ultimately then we do decide, okay, like you said, here's phase 1, phase 2, and
Right, and here, once we get here, we'll add it 200,000 from the district.
The community has at least the Monona community has a history of the library expansion and remodeling was stimulated partly because the mayor and the city council indicated that they would put in X amount of tax dollars if private donations were up to a certain point. I forget what exactly the amount was. It was 40, 60, or 50, 50, something like that. But there is that, though. But it's
Well, we also did basically the foundation, not the district, did the fundraising for the orchestra pit.
yeah.
so
So, I mean,
both those
Well,
examples.
the foundation got
I think
started.
it's helpful to know where the power is going to start, where the leadership is going to.
And that's where I think the people on the MGF board were really helpful. There were folks on the board who were part of that fundraising effort with the orchestra pit. There were people on that board who were involved with the library project, and like I said, they really, I think, gave a lot of really good feedback about things to consider, you know, as we move forward. And so I do see, as we start to pull this together, besides the board, that foundation board as well being a good sounding board, perhaps of helping us, you know, plan this out. So I guess what I'm looking for tonight, is there any concern with us continuing to move forward to trying to develop a plan?
I think it's great.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, and I know we're not taking a vote, it's not an action item, but a little bit more feedback about the tennis courts. We have consensus that we should add that, or?
Yes, definitely. If you're gonna update everything outside, might as well go for it.
Yeah, I
Go big,
think-
go big, go home.
And then plan, you know, you can plan in phases, and maybe they wouldn't, you know, I mean, and I don't know is our press box still in terrible shape, or is it?
Yeah, I think that is a
So that's where you
priority.
have to look at what the priorities are and then kind of figure out how, but yeah, I think it'd be worth considering that, because it's a big enough.
Are the bleachers bad? They seem okay.
No, it's a capacity
They can-
issue,
oh,
so,
you add bleachers.
so that's what we need to figure out is, do you actually have to replace them, or can we somehow
Just add
add?
on, yeah.
Yeah,
I would just, you know, I think when we went through a whole lot of the building project over the years, though, the tennis courts, Dan, I think that there were concerns, and I think you know perhaps where they came from, but the tennis courts are facing in the wrong direction. And they appear to be, I think the report back to us was that they're fairly suitable for physical education and that sort of thing. But I think there's also tennis courts that are facing in the right direction at Ahuska Park and are perfectly good. So, and I think the estimate on that was $350,000, if I recall. So I think I think I would kind of take that into consideration.
Well, don't we need capacity for both varsity and junior varsity? Isn't that part of the issue too? I mean, currently our varsity does use Ahuska, but I mean, they probably, presumably, if we did redid the courts, they would come back. But
Sure.
I think we need to.
We lost 1 or 2 courts. I don't remember when the new high school was built, so it wasn't just the direction; it's we lost a court.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, there was another one across the street near the football stadium that
Okay.
got wiped out by the new design.
Okay.
It was maybe just one.
I guess I would set
So-
some priorities, and
Right.
Okay.
And we do,
we've
in
got a
fact,
lot
is
going on.
we do put money in every year to maintain those
We
courts
do.
so that they are suitable for FIAD classes. So if we actually replace them, perhaps we wouldn't have to do that. I don't know what it's, 10, 20 grand a year. I mean, it's
I think at least.
substantial. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But I would guess by now the cost is more than 300-some thousand.
I would recommend doing the grand plan, and then let's sit down and figure out where to go
Priorities.
from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like every possible thing we can imagine that we need done, and then work it out.
Yeah.
Instead of, well, we should do this, because we don't know what anything costs,
Yeah.
what anything is, or, So.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue working on that. We'll continue to update the board here as we move forward. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Board reports, starting with community engagement, communications, and government relations.
Well, it was a good meeting the other night. It was pretty good. We focused mostly on what I guess I'm calling, for lack of a better name, a community education night, where we're going to start out showing a documentary and inviting people, not only students, but community members and actually Dane County members. The first one we're hopefully going to start out with is the 13th. Which is a Netflix documentary. I was originally hoping to do it monthly, but I realized I got put the cart before the horse there and went a little crazy. So we're going to start in hopefully end of February will be our first one, and then we're going to take a look and see what happened and see if we should do it again or not do it again, or when we do it again, stuff like that. So we're just going to do one learning process and then sit down and figure out what we learned from it. I was hoping to partner with Black Student Union, but they don't have the bodies right now. So I'm actually going to partner with Forever Friends, who's very excited to be doing that. And they're go-getters, and they'll probably get some of the Black Student Union members there anyway. So we got a subcommittee to hammer out some details that we're not going to meet till after the New Year's.
Good. Questions for Jeff? Thank you. Eric, teaching, learning, and equity.
We met on December 4th. We heard from a number of people in the district, including Shelby, the equity coordinators at her position, and then also the principals from the high schools. They talked about our integrated comprehensive systems. We got some data from them, which was very helpful to establish kind of what we are already doing within the district. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 15th. And we're going to hear from some different people, teachers, some from Monona Grove, some from outside of Monona Grove, get some more feedback on what it's like to be a minority teacher in districts.
Excellent.
And just to clarify, there were principals there from all the buildings. It wasn't just the high school. So
Did I say high school?
You said
I'm
high school.
sorry.
You probably didn't
From
mean
all the
that.
buildings.
No,
That's what I meant.
I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, Susan.
Right, thanks.
Okay. Susan, policy committee?
All right, so we met December 5th, and there's actually a report here, and the policies are on the agenda, so we'll cut to the chase and talk about those when we get to that. And we are continuing to work on the equity one, deciding what should be in policy versus how definitive you want to be. And we still have about 23 policies to go on the current Neola update. By then, we'll be getting another one probably, so we need to get those done at the next meeting. That's it. All right, when we do have the next meeting scheduled, which in
Okay.
January. So.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just,
Dean?
Susan, are there any of these that are really substantive changes
Well,
to them that you'd have us take a look at?
Well, when we get to L, where we're actually looking at the policies for tonight, there are a couple. Then we'll talk about those when we get to them, as opposed to during my report. Thanks.
Oh, excuse me.
That's okay.
I thought we were there.
We're not quite.
Okay. Good. Action items, possible action items. Summer school dates 2019.
Okay, this one I think is very straightforward. It's status quo, and so the only thing that really changes every year is, depends on where 4th of July falls, as far as the actual number of days, whether we end up with 17 or 18 days for summer school. So you see the memo attached by Lisa Height with the recommendation of the dates. And so it's 4-week schedule with July 4th and 5th off. So we're looking for approval for the summer school dates for 2019.
I'd like a motion for approval of the summer school dates for 2019 as presented.
Move approval.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 2019-20 summer school calendar. I'm sorry, school calendar, not summer school calendar. School calendar.
Okay, the school calendar as well is pretty much a status quo calendar. What changed this year is the process in bringing the recommendation to the board. So we did develop a committee. It was a voluntary committee. All staff members were invited to participate. And so I included the meeting minutes of the committee that gets into the detail of what the discussion was about. But ultimately, the charge of the committee is to choose and recommend the dates, basically when the vacation days lie, when the in-service days, and this was a much easier schedule to do than previous years, just because of where September 1st fall, where the Christmas break and so on. And so there really was. They did do 2 different staff surveys to get feedback. The first one more general, about general ideas about priorities for when vacations are and so on. And then the second survey actually broke it down to 2 proposals where they asked for feedback on, which one you prefer. The one thing that I'll point out that's a little bit different on this year is when Halloween falls, that, when we have the end of the first quarter and possible vacation and in-service day there, I think that probably influenced which week the staff preferred, for that date, which makes sense, as well to fall during that break period of time. So, like I said, there's no major changes in this calendar than we have had in previous years. So we're looking for approval for the 1920 school calendar.
I'd like a motion for approval of the 2019-20 school calendar as presented.
Could I just ask a question?
Why don't we can move it and you can ask a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's wait.
Dean?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion.
We did get a little feedback about the process that was used. Have you had a chance to talk to the staff about that?
Sure. So, and it's in the committee minutes as well, some of the discussion, and I understand that the board received an email from 2 of the committee members expressing concern. And the concern was that they wanted to talk about issues that were not calendar issues, legitimate items to be discussed, things about, how in-service days are used and so on. And, as I told them from the first meeting, that's beyond the scope of the committee. However, I have the information that was discussed and been shared with principals. They said they really need to have, and they have had those discussions, regularly with, at the building level, and we'll continue, to do that. So there was a little bit of frustration by the couple of committee members that wasn't going to be part of the committee discussion, but that really is not a calendar issue, it's scheduling issues, and really have to include a lot more people than just a 12-person calendar committee. Those have to include a lot of people in the buildings to talk about schedule changes.
Business changes.
So I think some of the things, one of the frustrations was the timing, that it was late, and we're going to try and improve that
No, we're right on time.
Okay. And then, did you meet with MGA at all about any of their issues? Or you're just gonna let that come to personnel?
Sure. Some of some of the items that were brought up during the discussion of the committee were similar items that have been brought up during fair meetings, and that would be a more appropriate forum.
Okay. Okay.
Susan?
But I think the concern about the timeliness was related to the wanting it to have a bigger scope than this committee charge was.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
so I think
That's
that,
correct.
so the timeliness was fine for what they had to do.
Okay.
So that, I mean, that was the issue, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, new high school course proposals.
Okay, Dr. Bross is here and can speak to the recommendation for 3 new high school courses.
We have 3 courses proposals in front of you. I'll just summarize them briefly and then take some questions. One of the courses is a math reasoning class, and we're looking to have that replace a course right now that we call technical math. That is dual credit through Madison College. We think it's a better fit for our student needs. We typically have about 1 section of that class a year taken by seniors. Typically students are looking to go on to some sort of technical field. We feel like the curriculum and the scope is a better match. It's just recently become dual credit through Madison College. So that would be a change in changing out 1 course.
That would be a dual credit course?
Yes. Another class is the assistant child care teacher course, and that class would be in addition, it would come in our family and consumer science area. This course is a semester-long course, and we, for the first time in my time here, have a teacher, Michael Friedel, who's licensed in that area. It's quite difficult to get licensed because of the number of hours required beyond just taking classes for that. But we're fortunate to have Michael on board now, so we're excited to be able to offer that class. It would be a semester course, and he's able to offer certification through that just because he's qualified to teach it, and there are certain criteria you have to meet. There's no cost for the certification to the students, and we would work with local daycares to have students get the experience they need for the certification as well in the class. The third class is in the area of art, and art is looking to offer a capstone course, if you would, in advanced placement. This one would be art studio, which would be more of the hands-on kind of course. There's an art history class as well that's advanced placement, but they felt like this was a better choice, which I agree. This would be a full year class, as AP classes are, at least most of them. And you can see the costs attached to that. It'd be contingent on enrollment, seeing if we have enough students interested. We've had some similar courses in place in the past. We've never tried the advanced placement in my time here to see what kind of interest we have from the students.
Any questions, Dean?
Did you survey the potential projection for a number of students that would fill the class or at least be economically feasible?
For the AP history?
Well, for all of these.
We haven't done that in the past typically in terms of a formal kind of survey. Staff will talk to students and see what kind of interest they get informally in their classes in terms of a need. And then typically our survey is we offer the class and see what enrollment's like, and if
They
we
don't
don't
show
get
you a
that,
number.
right.
The people that propose these assume that they'll be the teachers for these classes?
That's correct. Well, the math reasoning we're still working on. That's teacher may be that may be a change, but the department understands that, and so they have understanding.
Susan?
I was just going to say, so the AP art class, does that replace the senior studio? Do we still have the senior studio class?
We haven't
had it for a while.
Yeah, we haven't had numbers in there to run that for a while.
Okay.
So, but
But it's
that's
sort of
the
along
course
that
I was
line.
talking about. Yes,
Right,
and
okay.
typically that would be oftentimes a semester class and wouldn't run the full year, depended on
Okay.
what that looked like. But that would be a similar idea, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. I'd like a motion for approval of the high school course proposals as presented. Dean?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Resolution of necessity pursuant to Chapter 32 of the Wisconsin statutes. Dan, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the attached resolution, we're looking for approval tonight. So it's first step in, we've been trying to negotiate some additional land purchase next to the site that we currently own adjacent to Glacial Gentleman School and the other 40 acres. We have not at this point been able to agree upon a purchase price. The owners are interested in selling, and so this is the first step to move down a process that could help us determine that acceptable price. I have personally spoken with both of the property owners. They're aware that we're initiating this process this evening, and they're also aware that we'll continue to try to negotiate in good faith and try to reach a voluntary settlement. So we're looking for this resolution of necessity, which is the first step to show that the board requires this property, the purchase of this property moving forward. And then the rest of the process is outlined, for you, and we'll continue to move forward and with the next steps.
I would note that this property essentially connects the bus road property where we're going to be constructing the elementary school with our Glacial Drummond School, and this will allow us to build pathways and roads that will allow us to move students and staff and so on safely between the properties, so we can make use of facilities on both properties in a safe and efficient manner. Dean?
The question I have is that I think in earlier discussions of this is a necessary step of good faith negotiation. And if that fails, eminent domain is a possibility.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I wish to continue the negotiations, and we would very much, I personally very much like to find a mutually agreeable settlement on this one. Susan?
Well, and Peter, does it continue to be clear that we're only looking at sufficient property to connect the two properties?
It's essentially the back 17 acres of the property that's in front of, that is on the south side of the bus road property.
And
which purchased.
we have expertise that's indicated that's how much we need to
Correct.
be able to, yeah.
Yeah, so the architects have had an opportunity to review this to determine that this is the land required. Thank you.
Right. And we've taken the section, and the section we're talking about is, part of it is divided by the existing lot line, where the north, behind the Friends of Cottage Grove Library property, and the access that the town owns or the village owns. There's a right of way there it must be in the town. It must be in the town. But that section from the back of essentially the Friends of the Public Library property on back to the property line of the bus road. Dean?
I think it would be, I could talk to you privately walking out, but I think it's important, you're probably on top of it anyway, is that I think it'd be very careful on how this is communicated in the newspaper and that sort of thing, because it could be interpreted that there's another 40 or something like that. So I think I think that maybe when this comes out, you need to talk to the editor or something like that along the lines that you and Peter and we've all talked about. This is a necessary thing to commit our commitment to the building of the school and that sort of thing.
For those who didn't ask, it's 14.77 acres.
I'm not really comfortable with eminent domain.
Like I said, neither am I, and I hope we
Right.
can reach a mutually
But can't we
settlement.
continue negotiating and then come back?
Actually, we have to, as part of the process, we have to continue
Right,
negotiating.
so we don't have to do eminent domain tonight.
No, this is just a resolution of
Right.
necessity.
But
It's-
if at some point we decide we can't go anymore, then we've given them permission to use eminent domain. They don't have to, you don't have to come back for.
No, we'll have to
another
come
mail.
back again
That's-
for more
That's
board
right.
action.
Right. This is just the resolution of necessity. It does nothing but state that we believe that this is necessary for the proper functioning of the schools. And it's the first step. There will be additional negotiations, and if we can't reach an agreement, then it'll come back here for us to decide the next step, including whether or not we go to use eminent domain. But it does not determine that we use eminent domain at this point. It just means that we can in the future. This is, if you're going to do it in the future, you have to start here. Okay?
So moved.
We have a motion for approval of resolution of necessity pursuant to Chapter 32 of the Wisconsin statutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Made that motion. Is a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Discussion items, policy revisions.
All right, let's see. Do you want to start with this, Dan, just because I'm, well,
Sure.
well, most of these there aren't major things. There was one that I know, Eric, you wanted to talk about was 2461.
Yeah, and do you want me to go just briefly?
I don't know, did you want to start somewhere else, Dan, or?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's an easier one, I think,
Yeah.
to start with.
So my request was just to make a small change to keep everything, but notify ahead of time, including the special education case manager and licensed educational agency rep, in addition to when the superintendent or principal is notified. I don't know how you had it written exactly
Let's
there.
see, that's what I was looking for, where that.
Um,
So you're not talking about the part where it says a parent who believes the audio recording is necessary should notify the director of student services. That's not the part you were talking
Nope,
about.
I think that's fine. I just want to add,
Well, it says down here further, the director will notify the parent of the status of the request. And
I'm saying the director of student services will notify the parent, but I also I think the director of student services should also notify the special education case manager and licensed educational agency representative that it's going to be recorded.
do you have any comment? I haven't thought about that because I
I
don't.
mean, it's going to happen whether it's in policy or not.
Oh, sure, that's what we say.
Right.
But,
Well,
No, I mean,
it does
that's
happen.
the.
Well, because you're working with a
Your IP
teacher.
team, of
so
course,
yeah,
needs
yeah,
to know that.
Yeah.
yeah, I know, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine. It doesn't hurt anything to put it in there. The policy is written for directing the parent, here is your rights to record.
Right.
It doesn't hurt anything, but
Not exactly. That policy is also written to notify staff that the parents can make that request.
all staff know that, especially ed teachers. I mean,
I think they should know that. I don't know if they all know that.
I don't agree with you.
I mean, that would be my concern. There may be staff that doesn't know that.
okay.
So this way, it's just.
Then you can
Well,
say we have
could you
policy.
say in that sentence, the director of student services will notify the parent and the
And staff.
IEP team
Yeah,
of the status?
That's
Would
fine.
that be
that's
good?
fine, yeah.
Okay.
You
That's
just,
all I'm
I
asking.
like to be less definitive, but make the point, yeah.
the thought being, if you walk in and you're part of the team and there's a video camera or something,
I'm not against recording the IEP
Right,
team
it's
meetings.
Right.
I
helpful
just
to
want
know
the IEP team to know that.
To
they're
know
gonna
that-
be recorded.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. So the way we could do that, because we're not going to meet again on this, but it would just be, would we make that as an amendment at the next meeting when we take action?
We can
Yeah,
do
is-
that if you want. We can amend it now if we want.
Or we could just bring it back.
we could
if
bring it
there's
back
kind
and
of
amend it.
consensus that we'd,
Let's
how,
see,
what's the
the
best way to handle
policy
it?
committee, these are policy
Oh.
committee recommendations. I think the committee meets
Well, we did
prior,
do January 8th, so that's true.
plus the day before the board meeting.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
I mean, we could run it through the committee.
the committee could amend it and bring it back.
right.
We could amend it tonight and bring it back. We could amend it next time
Well, I'll make a motion to amend
to add.
to add,
we can do that without
amend
being
it.
notified for action.
Because that's, we're just managing
Here
that
for
We did
first read.
include consideration in
Yeah.
the.
Oh, you
So
did.
I'll make a motion to amend policy 2461
to specifically do what?
to include
And the IEP team in.
the IEP team in the notification with the parent.
Yeah. So it's in the second paragraph.
Is there a second?
When you're done, send the amendment to Joyce. Make sure
Actually,
it's
yeah,
there.
I can do
I'll
it.
check.
I got it. I got it.
Dean second. Discussion? Okay, for, vote on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So what we've done is first reading, when we've amended it, when it comes back to second reading, it will be in its amended state.
Right.
We'll go through it.
And it again.
Under what circumstances would we not allow a meeting, IP meeting to be recorded?
None?
No, I mean,
There's no circumstance we wouldn't.
we'd have the right to if we felt that the parent did demonstrate the need, but I can't imagine when we'd ever exercise that authority.
And the issue, the significance of it is it becomes a formal part of student records, so once you record it. So the district has to find a way to store that audio or video or whatever it is. It becomes, it's not just, you don't just do it and they walk off with it. It becomes a part that we have to keep. So it becomes a custodial issue. So it's not that's the only issue. It's not a big.
And there is no, I sent this to you, Peter, from the Department of Education, but there is no criteria written in IDEA that says it's okay to record or not record.
Right.
It's not, it's really
It's not
vague.
addressed by law,
It doesn't really address it.
Well, there is an issue with Wisconsin law, which is what we call a single consent state,
Yeah.
which is that anybody is allowed to record anything secretly, so long as they're a party to that discussion. In other words, if they're part of it, you can't put a record to other people who aren't party of it, but you can, if you're party to it, you're allowed to do it too.
But then we get into policy versus state law, and we talk about phones, can we take
Well, yeah,
away
but
phones?
policy has to be
Technically, we
consistent
can't,
with
but it's our
state law.
policy.
But the concern I would have is if we say, if I was a parent and I felt that I needed to record something, and the district said no, I would just exercise my rights under state law and secretly record it.
Well, that's fine.
Now-
I can't do anything about that.
Well, I know, but what we want is a situation where everybody knows that they're being recorded.
Right.
So what we would want to do in that case is say, yes, you recorded. That way people won't be tempted to secretly record it, and then everything's on the table.
But that's why you have a policy like this.
Yeah.
So it enables parents to know they can request it, and probably it's going to be yes. and-
There is one thing to keep in mind, though, that if a parent does want to record the IEP meeting, and we say they have to give us a day notice, we have to make sure that they can meet. They have enough time to meet, so we couldn't say.
Well, I would assume the meeting would be scheduled, and this would be a case where they get this notification of schedule, and they say, hey, I want to record this. So I think that's my understanding of how that would work, yeah.
It
So they would
basically
have-
says you have to notify them 2 days before the IEP team meeting, meaning the
So the
meeting's
meeting's already been
scheduled.
scheduled, yeah.
Right, but then if let's say a parent did come and notified us, the day of, we would have to reschedule the IEP meeting so that,
Make
we
arrangements.
could, we have to make another arrangement to,
Well, that would
unless it's okay
happen.
with everybody.
Unless everyone agreed.
That would happen anyway, because you
Yeah.
wouldn't have the equipment set up, so you'd have to do that. So,
The
yeah.
language, though, is preferably at least 2 business
Right.
days, so that leaves staff the option of allowing it if they're prepared to do it.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so let's fix it so people understand.
Well,
small change.
I think it is an informative piece for parents, and it is, and if you're a parent and you are looking at an IP, I'm assuming you might read this if you're interested in recording it, and so it's helpful to have it in there so they know that, and so staff knows.
And then I would have a question about why video recording is different, why we treat it different than audio recording.
It's a bigger production.
Because that statement, again, video recording IPT meeting is prohibited. That's contrary to state law. I could legally secretly record it. So I'm concerned about how that works. And in fact, if somebody was going to record it these days, most likely thing they do is just turn on their phone and record the video on video. So I'm just concerned about how this works with practice.
Why don't we go back, we have the amendment.
But, yeah, but my,
And
Well, that doesn't get at his question.
yeah, but why is video and audio treated differently, I guess would be my question.
I guess I think it's because it's a bigger production to set it up and becomes a storage issue. We have to store it somewhere, and, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, that was the. I don't
Well,
know,
that's
how do we know
that's
how often
legal.
this gets, I mean, I don't think, the policy, when it says it's prohibited, if somebody does
Did
it
it
anyway,
themselves,
we
right.
can't, you know, we
Yes.
can't obviously do anything about that, and.
I mean, should it be that the district will not provide video recording unless? I think that's probably the way to do it. If that's the intent, we won't set up and videotape it. I
Right.
think that would be pretty.
I would recommend not making any changes without consulting with you council.
Sure.
Yeah, because it came across as a. Yeah.
Sure, I understand. I've just got these questions.
Well,
I don't know what the
they
resolution is.
obviously don't have a legal issue with it, or they wouldn't be recommending it, but
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does seem to run contrary to my understanding, but I know I'm not a lawyer of the statute of the law. There was a case of, recording on the bus was perfectly legal in Wisconsin. It said under this law, video recording the bus is perfectly legal, for example, on a
Right.
school bus. With minors, no school bus, perfectly legal.
Well, I think there's some pieces of this, you'd have to research
place of
the
employment,
records
it
on
brings in
confidentiality of
That's
student
it
records.
does, yeah.
Because it becomes a student
It
record.
does stretch out into more complex areas, and so I don't know,
No.
I mean, I'm comfortable with the way it is, I just assume not change it, but.
Okay. Other points? Would you care to talk about 9130?
Yeah, that's the only other one that I think was a significant. And you'll recall we had a lot of discussion about this with the board, and let me get to that point. The concern was, well, we heard different things from the board. We heard that the board felt the last time several board members had commented, they didn't think it should have come to the board, then other people thought it should come to the board. And then I know that there were some opinions stated that it would be nice if there'd be a way to write a policy where the board could decide. And so we thought, it is true that if a policy remains silent on something, and it's not illegal, it can be done. So the way we chose to get at that was to simply say that, where is this part? We eliminated, we had, let me see, is that sentence in there that we struck about the,
No,
because we were coming forward with a new thing.
Yeah.
So here, it simply says it goes to the superintendent makes a decision, and then it stops there. It just says that he makes a decision and notifies the parent. So when it remains silent from that point on, if the parent is not happy with the result, they always have the right to bring it to the board. And then the board would, depending on what the issue was, have the decision of whether to review it or not, and what the review should be. We just felt like it got really difficult to try to work out. I mean, we did talk about this for quite a while, to try to make steps. Well, if it's this kind of thing, it could be this step, this step, this step, but I know you felt like you wanted the board to have the right to not take it up too. And we thought, well, okay, if we just stay silent on it, and we simply say, goes to the superintendent, he makes a decision, lets them know. But it doesn't say anything about him being final, doesn't say anything about they can't, there is no further appeal, we're just silent. Then people clearly do have the right to bring it to us, and then we have to deal with it. And we just felt like that was a better way to go.
Is there anybody that thinks it shouldn't come to the board? Because that's kind of what we do.
Well, there were people that felt the last one should have been handled prior to coming to us. I mean, I heard that from a few.
But that
people,
doesn't
so-
mean,
That doesn't mean.
that doesn't mean that it should come to us.
Oh,
We
okay.
it means it should have been handled.
Well, so I'm saying
Three
there's no
steps
reason
before
to
that.
state it because it's a given, that if we just say silent on it, people can bring it to us. And I would assume if a parent wasn't happy with whatever decision the superintendent made, they would say, well, I'm going to go to the board, because that's the usual response. So I just think it seemed like an easier way to handle it, and I guess my recommendation would be to do it this way, and then just see if we have a problem with it down the road, we can always come back and revisit it. But it seems like a cleaner way to deal with it to me than trying to lay out a whole bunch of steps again and not,
I would hate to have it come to that, and then board members say, well, there's nothing in here that says we can take it, so we're not going to
Well,
listen to it.
that wouldn't be an accurate interpretation of policy to say
Well,
that. So a board member could say it,
I
but,
mean, there have been disagreements on the board of accuracy of how they interpret policy before, and then it's a mess.
well, I would assume you would have a superintendent who would know that when a policy is silent, it doesn't rule it out. So I just don't see that as an issue. But
Any other comments on that? So essentially, we talked about a board role last time this was before us, and the policy as it's written is now silent on the board role. It is
Right.
also silent on making the superintendent's determination final.
It does not say that it's final. The other change we made was in the beginning of the green, we just said, this was stated at the beginning of the policy, but we thought it needed to be stated again here that, I'm just losing it again. That anyway, that the preference is to resolve these things informally, that, and that it's limited to core materials. That was another key part that we don't want. You know, if a teacher brings in a newspaper article one day, that kind of thing, we don't, those need to be resolved. So when we said core materials, we're talking things that are regularly used in a class. Would be like a book that's taught, or a textbook that's used, or a film that's shown.
That doesn't refer to core classes.
No, core materials within a class. The materials that are used pretty consistently with the class. So it could be a tech ed class.
Things that are sort of a predetermined part of the
correct, right.
Right.
As opposed to things that people are bringing in all the time and could change. And then it says concerns the additional language here that we put in. We kind of moved it from, we left it in the beginning of the policy, but because these policies have subheadings which in this format don't show up, this is referring specifically to instructional materials, it now says concerns about specific instructional materials should first be raised with the classroom teacher, then with the building principal if necessary, in an effort to resolve the matter informally. If a satisfactory resolution is not reached, requests for inspection of such materials go to the director of instruction. So we put that in first, that because that's in fact how usually it happens. It's pretty rare for it to, for it to go that far. So we felt good about where we landed, and we're hoping you do too. As a board.
No, I have a couple issues. One is the no material subject to complaint may be removed or withdrawn solely because of President's ideas that may be unpopular or offensive to some.
You raised that last time.
I know, I raised that last time.
I'm going to give you the same answer.
and I have a trouble with why we would take that particular objection and say this is the only one that you can't use in an appeal process.
Well, my answer last time, and I would say the same thing, is the First Amendment protects unpopular speech. And I think when we have controversial discussions, controversial issues being discussed in classrooms, being addressed with various materials, it's possible someone will object to some of it. And I just think that just because they find it's offensive to them for their religious belief or their cultural beliefs or whatever it is, that just saying it's unpopular or offensive to some should not be the grounds for removing something. There should be a greater cause in that. I would say with our last material, there was a greater concern than that.
Sure.
So I think that...
but what you said, if it's controversial,
right.
They could bring it to us.
No.
No, you definitely, they could bring it to us.
Well, sure they can.
Complain.
Sure they can.
But if it's offensive, they can't. Why the difference between controversial and offensive?
It doesn't say they can't bring it. It says it won't be removed or withdrawn solely because it presents ideas that may be unpopular or offensive.
But why is offensive singled out?
Because I believe it should be in there. And I would argue that...
But what else should be in there?
That's all I can think of. I think that statement is very important. Because I think we did hear somebody, people can complain about a unit in a curriculum that they don't like because they find it offensive. They think it's too liberal or it's too right-wing or it's too not Christian or it's too whatever. And I think the point is you want to protect ideas that may be different from the mainstream, and you don't want to withdraw materials simply because they bother somebody.
Okay, here's
Actually,
the other
person, because the parent always has the right to have their student opt out. I just think this is an important sentence, and I'm not going to agree to remove it myself. The rest
you
of
guys
you
are just having an argument at 10 o'clock at night.
I know.
It's a personal argument. And here's the deal.
It's an important
one.
Susan, you don't have a floor right now.
Hold
I
on.
recognize you.
But
you will have a floor.
Can I just say one more thing? If you would like to remove it when we go to vote on this, you could make an amendment to strike that sentence.
I just want to explode it.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to explode it. I actually would have less objection to this phrase if we remove the words "to some." Because
what word?
To some, because it's objectionable to some. Because to some, to me, seems targeted at minorities. If you ask
Wow,
me.
I don't see that at all.
And if you, that's what it seems. It seems to devalue the idea that one person in a room might be offended and another person, that the person's individual sense of offense is somehow not valid. And I would have a lot less of a problem with that problem if it said to some.
So
If it didn't say to some.
you would amend it by striking the word to some.
To some, yeah.
That was actually the argument that my least favorite senator used when they brought back the Indian racist mascot bill.
Jeff doesn't have the floor either. We need to get
Sorry.
control of the meeting. I
Thank
want
you.
the
All right, I've got
discussion.
control of it. Jeff? Oh, somebody put up their hand. Jeff?
I said what I needed to say. That was the thing, was we're not going to, the majority thinks that just because a few people think it's racist, doesn't mean that we're going to ruin it for everybody,
Yeah.
basically.
I mean,
and really, it was just a stupid, it absolutely targets minorities. So.
I think that that's the case. And actually, if you go back and start researching the origin of that language, it starts showing up in the civil rights era.
So if we cross out the words to some, I don't think that, to me, that doesn't change the meaning.
No,
So
I
I
think
might
it
be,
makes it
I might be
better.
willing to do that,
Yeah.
but,
Okay.
but I just want the rest of the sentence in there,
Yeah.
because I think it's important.
I looked back at the process by which we considered To Kill a Mockingbird, and two of the things that we discussed, and I think you have this list of 4 things:
Right.
appropriateness, accuracy, objectivity, the use being made. There were 2 other things that seemed to me that we discussed. One was the availability of suitable alternatives, because that was a point of discussion. And I think that would be an important part of any consideration if we're looking at core material. And the other one would be the other point I put was taken from our strategic plan, which would be the interests of the district in providing equitable learning environments and school community for all students and families. And I think we should consider that when we're reviewing curriculum. In other words, alternatives are the good alternatives, and the other thing would be this issue of equitable learning environments. Because those are what we considered. Okay, Susan?
What we have basically agreed on in terms of process, particularly when we have 15+ policies in front of us, is that we've agreed, because we want to have this discussion and we want the board input on these issues, we've agreed that you provide us with a draft, we'll take it back to policy, see how it fits, and bring it back to the board for the board decision. We've now talked about this for 20 minutes when we don't have a draft. So basically,
Susan, you are
I
free to make a motion.
have the
You are free to
floor.
make, no, you're free to make a motion to end this discussion on this item if you like.
I don't have to
But-
do that. What I'm telling you is we have a process.
I am asking questions about policy that was brought to this board on which for me to make a decision on. Are you saying I don't have a right to ask or have those questions or have a discussion?
We're not taking
Totally
action tonight,
misunderstanding
so,
the
well,
point.
but your point about bringing it in written form
Just
would
try-
apply more if we were going to vote on it, which I don't think we're going to
And
vote on.
I'm just,
You're
and actually I have
saying
some things in writing, but I wanted to ask some questions before I.
But can you, so the first one you said was availability of suitable alternatives, and the second one was the interests of equity are served by, what was that?
I took the strategic plan language, which would be the interests of the district in providing equitable learning environments and school community for all students and families.
Okay, yeah, I wrote on it.
That's the phrase that's directly in our strategic plan. And I did that because those are the things that we discussed the last time.
I don't remember discussing those last time.
Well,
These 4
we
were the
were-
ones that were in the old original policy
Right.
and in this one, and they've been carried, I mean, they've been in Monona Grove policy for decades, so we didn't look at changing those.
Yeah.
But
I do have some documentation, Susan. I just wanted to have some discussion before I distributed it to see that if it was still relevant after we got some discussion and other people thought similar things.
Hey, Peter, this one seems like it's going to be talked for a long time. Can we table this particular
Oh,
one?
sure. Well, this is the last one we got. This is the last one we got.
We sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
well,
Okay.
you could also,
Here, pass these down.
since we are meeting again in January, you could send that to us, or you got it right now.
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing is that I put on the end here sort of language about how it would come to the board. And essentially it says,
I think there's more,
yeah, it was just one
there
page.
might be one short. Yeah, Dean
Oh.
doesn't have one.
Sorry, I got one more. Yeah, you need them. That's all right. And then at the bottom, there's discussion of the board role, which is, I try to be just flexible.
Technically, that's how our democratic republic works, right? If you're having a problem with a public institution, you take it to your elected officials.
That's right.
we can't say you can't do that, and I agree, I'm sorry.
What's your rationale for no material should be removed with pending the determination? I mean, I don't want, to me, the reason that's important to have in there is because I don't want an irate parent badgering a teacher to pull something right now, and it's kind of protection for the staff that it will not be pulled until it's gone to.
I see that point. The other problem I have with it is people could look at it and say, oh yeah, this was a mistake. But now it's locked in because it's going to take a week and a half for the superintendent to make a decision. I would say that the teacher, if the teacher, for example, wanted to remove it themselves, they said they
This is all about a complaint being filed.
Yeah,
So
I
if the
know.
teacher wants to remove it, they can just do that. Well, maybe they
Except
can't.
that this-
If it's part of the core curriculum, they can't. I mean, they have to discuss
Well,
with
except
the
that this-
department. This policy is not about that.
No.
This policy is about a parent who has a concern.
No, I know, but
Community.
but what this policy says is once a parent starts the complaint,
Right.
then the teacher would not be free to remove it. Is that? That's
Yeah,
the way
but
I read it.
I would argue that this needs to be in there. Dan, what do you
They
think?
can't file a complaint until
Yeah.
they've already had a chance to have the discussion with the teacher
Yeah.
to pull it.
And if the
I
teacher
mean,
wants
the
to
first
pull
two
it, they
paragraphs
talk to the
cover
superintendent.
that. So.
Yeah, that's not a big issue. It does seem to me that you don't, if something comes up and it's like everybody's, oh yeah, we don't want to lock it in for the process, is all. You know what I mean?
I think this ought to be in there because I don't see it as a problem. I just don't, I guess I don't read it that way. I think it's not a problem. It's more, for me, it's more protection of staff that they can say, well, if you really are going to be adamant that you want this removed, you're going to have to go through this process. I mean, if you can't resolve it informally,
Yeah.
I mean, if they resolve it informally, they maybe could do that. I mean, I don't know that a teacher should have the option to remove a piece of core curriculum on their own. If it's agreed on by the department, they're teaching a certain thing.
Well,
I'm not sure that,
yeah,
I'm not sure they
no.
should. That gets into a whole other can of worms. I just think.
Yeah, I just don't want to.
I think it's protection
I
for
just
staff, and
think
it's
a blanket prohibition on it just seems a little too
this
broad.
is real common in all the districts, and I would argue for leaving it in there. I guess.
And then clarifying the board's role. The board could affirm the decision, take no action, or
Well, see,
take some other action.
I prefer to remain silent on the board, and just I would not agree to your last paragraph personally.
Dean?
The last two paragraphs.
I think these are all suggestions suitable for discussion, debate. When we do it, if anybody has recommendations for it, if we could get them ahead of time and it's a part of that, I know you.
Well, this is the first reading.
Yeah, I know, but then we could have the debate when it's up, I think.
Well, I did want to have a discussion, get some feedback on these things before I distribute this paper, before I distribute it. That's why I think that's perfectly reasonable, because we haven't had discussion on some of these things. But this is some of the language that I was thinking about. So the one question would be is whether or not we want an explicit word role or whether we want to be silent. I think the other thing we're left down to is this. I would like to add these other type 2 criteria for things we consider. And
Oh.
people can take that as they like.
All of those are they're all subjective, so sort of,
Yeah.
so it doesn't.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
Everything is.
everything else. So yeah, I don't know if I feel too strongly about it.
Okay.
But I mean, personally, I might be okay with adding the 5 and 6, but that next sentence about the no material shall be removed, I would keep that sentence in, but possibly strike just some. And then I would not agree with removing the next sentence, and I would not agree with adding the last 2 paragraphs. That's just where I see personally. Just because I really think
And-
we're better served by just remaining silent on it and dealing with things. I'd like to try it that way, I guess, for a while and say.
Well,
I mean, not every-
I guess I would ask the board members,
Yeah.
do we want to put the board role in there sort of explicitly, even though it's a general, I don't lay out a specific process here. Or do we want to leave it silent? I hadn't thought about leaving it silent as a way to deal with it, because then the board can just deal with it silent.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that when I wrote this. So the question is, do you prefer leaving it silent, or do you prefer having some?
The problem I see with leaving it silent is you will start, everybody will get a different response. Granted, we've had one in my 7 years, but that's where you start to get yourself in trouble. Why didn't you hear mine? You heard theirs. And mine was way more realistic than theirs. So I think spelling it out and treating everybody the exact same instead of taking some and not taking others, I think that just sets us up for trouble.
Dean?
I think that I may agree or disagree with all your points, but I think I appreciate you putting them out ahead of time for us, and I think if we're going to have amendments to these, is that it would be nice to have some notice on board docs or something like that of what some of the amendments may be, not all of them, but some of the ones that you find more controversial, and then let's vote on them next week.
All right. Well, tonight's the first reading.
Yeah.
So now you have these in front of you. You can consider them, and when we bring it back, we can amend it if we'd like. But the other thing is we can do it next time. We can do it tonight, we can do it next time. Or the question is, do we want to refer any of this back to the committee? It's been to the committee twice. I don't know if that's necessarily the committee wants to take it up.
Yeah, this is sufficiently substantive that I would not be in favor of voting on it tonight, because I think we should all have time to think about it.
Right.
And that was the point, whereas Eric's that was pretty
Right,
easy.
sure.
So I guess I would suggest that you send it to Joyce.
Yep.
So she can put it in board docs, and that we all have these hard copies, and we can consider
And I'm going to
it as
adjust it.
amendments.
Given our
Yeah.
discussion, I'll just adjust this.
Okay. I mean, does that make sense to people, or, and then we'd have it in advance of the next meeting? And, you know, if we get to the next meeting, we feel like we're still not ready, we can table it.
We'll always table it again.
It would be easy to do if it were not a controversial issue,
Yes.
but I think prepare the amendments that you may decide not to add one or two of the amendments as a result of this.
Exactly.
But, let's put it up and vote it up or down.
Yeah. We'll do that.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, then we can move on to school safety drills.
Oh,
you had one?
I had one question on, I saw that there's 2 policies out here that's repeated 3 times.
Are there? Didn't see that.
Which one?
I mean,
You're talking.
I know, I might be getting tired, but I see.
No, it's because of the way the manual is set up. Which
Is that what? Okay.
Yeah, we have a professional staff and a support staff and a administration.
all
So
right.
they say the same thing. You're right.
I thought I was seeing stuff.
It drove us a little nuts too, and
They're seeing double.
we'd like to consolidate them, but
It's nice that you
it'd be a lot
notice
of
and
work.
ask the
So,
question.
yeah.
Because I was sitting there reading, I'm like, wait a minute, what is going
Did I just
on
read
here?
that? Yeah, I know. Thank you for noticing that. 'Cause,
Okay.
yeah, there are a fair number of policies that are like that, where they're exactly the same wording. They're just pitched to the different.
Okay. All right, then
It's
I'm not
it's
crazy.
it's
All right,
way of
moving on
organizing
then.
the policy.
Go ahead,
It's not
Chair.
my favorite thing.
Actually, the other thing in parliamentary authority, it says the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Orders. The most recent of rules is 11th edition. I think that might be, just clarifying that might be useful.
Newly revised in where it says. Well, but it won't be the 11th edition forever. What if they come out with a 12th?
I know.
I mean, so that's why you just say the most recent.
The reason I would say that, though, is if they changed it, what happens is that the pages change. More than anything else, the pagination of the book changes. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
This
It's
is why I
just a
think
thought.
along, because then you got to go back and change the policy of Robert's Rules.
Well, no, actually, we could just continue to use 11
Oh, I see what you're saying.
until we change it.
Yeah, but I don't think they take us out.
I mean, conceivably, what should happen is if Robert's Rules goes out with a new edition and it changes, then you all should be sending us an update.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Neil should happen.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if it says the 11th, there's no question in your mind when you're in the bookstore, oh, I need the 11th, or online or whatever. Not the 10th.
So it might not.
It's a minor point.
Might not be
but-
Moving
section
right
49.
along.
It's a minor point.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think Robert's rules really helps us.
We don't.
Oh, yeah.
no, we haven't been following it for the last 20 minutes.
We should have set a point of
Oh, yeah,
order
we
about 45 minutes.
Under the small board section.
Well, I guess, yeah.
I was supposed to help be efficient.
School safety drills. Are we ready?
Okay, I know our principals would love to answer any questions, but they also, hopefully they'll be brief, it's awful late, but no, the reality is, this is something that we've been doing. The new law under Act 143, now this requires that we annually report to the board a summary of our most recent school safety drills. So the law's been on the books for quite some time about doing fire drills, tornado drills, and 2 other I don't remember the exact wording, safety type drills. Now they've been more explicit about a specific drill dealing with the school threat. And so you'll see a written report. from each of our principals on their fall safety drill with regard to a safety threat. Department of Justice has actually, the group has put out the guidelines for us to follow with regard to this compliance. So if there are any questions on any of the safety drills, we can answer them this evening. But so statutorily, the board needs to review. You don't have to take action. The minutes will reflect that the board has reviewed them, and then we'll be in compliance. But I've also attached the latest policy perspectives from WSB because there wasn't any DPI guidance on this. So they've offered their guidance about how the board should accept these reports.
How many kinds of safety drills are there? Fire.
We got fire, tornado, okay, and then of all the other types of any kind of threat, there's different levels. And so the principals are going, rotating through all those different types of threats.
What word is used for the threat?
So we actually, I don't have it memorized, we have 4 different categories. I should know this. So the Alice situation is when there's an imminent threat, okay? Then we've got where we have a entire building hold that classes can go on, but we're monitoring the entrances in and out. We have classroom holds if there's an incident in a hallway or commons area. And the 4th one is if there is a perceived threat outside of the school, is kind of on a notice.
It's a bank robbery in the area.
Yeah, so wait until we can determine if there is an actual active threat or not. It's kind of a heightened awareness.
Okay.
What do we do to help the kids process after a drill of them getting shot?
Well, we don't.
I mean, it's basically. I mean, it's.
Okay.
It's
Well,
if you're doing an Alice drill, you're doing it because there's an active shooter drill, and it's in the
an
news.
active threat.
An active threat.
May or
Well,
may not be a shooter.
it's in the
but-
news often that
Yeah.
schools are
Well,
getting shot up. So
Sure. So it varies obviously by level. So I don't know if we're like any of the principals responded. It's an entirely different response at the high school than it would be at an elementary school.
I mean, I don't care if anybody wants to answer.
The preliminary steps are spelled out, but Jeff's right. One report did say that students felt comfortable, but I think that was the high school one. So I guess that'd be a question maybe to ask, since we have a couple elementary people here. What responses you got from kids?
The one teacher said the kids are actually ready for more. They're ready for evacuation. I mean, we did the book last year. We did, now we've read the book again, and we did our first drill this fall. And so they're getting comfortable with the conversations, and they're ready for. So our at Winnequa was more of a talking and thinking drill instead of actually doing anything. And so some of our feedback from staff is that the kids are ready to do something, like to actually practice something. So that will come this spring for us. So I mean, the kids are more ready than the teachers are.
But what do you do to help them process what you just did? I mean, it's a sad state of affairs, not for you, for us, for everybody, community.
Yeah.
That kids are ready for the active shooter to come into their room. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
Have you read that? Have you ever been able to get a chance to read the book that?
No.
So that'd be a great way to start. I mean, there's a video of Officer Jess, and they're reading this book to the students. But there's also a copy. I'm prepared, so I'm not scared. It's a kid's book, and it puts it in like more kids' terms and how they look at. So it's not just like there's not a shooter in the book, right? They just talk about practicing, and so it puts it in kids' terms. So that's where we started, and it's more of a discussion and a talk. It was not like an active, like anyone's barricading or anything like that at the elementary level. And so I think that'd be a good resource if I think there's a copy even downstairs, so they can kind of see what we start with. And that's all shared with families, so there's another, so it's not just a drive we do with kids and then no one knows, but all this information went to families last spring when we rolled out this idea that we wanted to start with Alice and through the book. So then on the day of the drill, we also informed through IC a memo to all the parents explaining what we did. And again, explained as a talking drill, read the book again, and so on and so forth. So I think that's kind of the way we support the students.
At all levels, the goal's been to obviously gradually introduce it to students, get feedback, work with them in very non-threatening kind of settings, and so kind of ramp them up so they're prepared for the drill, so that we can minimize any kind of trauma or anxiousness. And then obviously we have counselors and psychs that are monitoring our kids that we know struggle with some of these things. So our goal ultimately is to have them prepared for the drill, walk into it slow enough that we're not having to do a lot of processing after we run. Even at the high school, we do tabletop exercises and talk through what ifs, and then the classroom teachers address it. We've done an advisory, and then students are told any kind of concerns or anxiety about things, please let an adult know or talk to your counselor. So we try to get feedback to how they're doing.
Because obviously we're in a community where a lot of kids aren't going to have that trigger, but I'm sure there are some that would trigger out on something like that. So.
Yeah.
And they might not necessarily go seek help either. So.
Right.
That kind of trigger can happen in a tornado drill too, because I saw it once with a student. It hadn't occurred to me that a student, because those were more routine and we did them, but I had a student who was
Probably
really
more
pretty
likely,
shaken up
yes.
by it, and I had to talk her through it. So
More likely
that's
in our
always
community.
right. It is more likely, I think, and so you have to. I think as
Right.
teachers, you just have to be aware of that, and other staff. Yeah.
I think I know that student, actually. All right. Future meetings, there's a long list. Didn't we talk about a workshop with relative to facilities in the construction? You and I?
If necessary, so what we talked about is
Sort of a
penciling in that first Wednesday of every month for a special meeting that could be a workshop for facilities. It could be a check-in, with me, to be determined depending on month by month.
Okay, yeah.
So that's why I put if necessary, or tentative, I guess, on each of
In other
those.
words, mark it off. And
March
when do you
6th.
want the first one to be?
So starting in, we have in February or March?
Yes, February 6th special board.
February, yeah.
Yeah.
February is the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the thoughts that I had is that in terms of the construction, we all want to get on the same page with EUA and Findorf. And it might be good to have a sit down, a 2-hour special meeting where we talk about hopes and dreams for our new school and facilities.
I should be-
So we, sort of Susan's point about, what we're expecting from that new school construction in terms of, expansion and so on is really clear, and their ideas are in front of us, so that we're starting from the
That
beginning.
part
Because
is
as he
more-
says, further in the process, you make a change, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah, well, to me, that part is clear and has been clear from the beginning, so I didn't see that as an issue really, but if people clearly see it, and I know that it came up tonight, it kind of surprised me, because I thought, I heard them say it several times. But to me, it's more about other things, or because when we first started talking about this a couple of years ago, there are all kinds of things you can do with a 21st century school. And I don't know if we're talking about any of that or not. I mean, the glass walls, common area, all that.
That's what our visionary team is
So
exploring.
there's already a visionary team, so I don't know that we need to do that. I mean, I just as soon have that come from
Well,
staff too. And
Oh, sure, but I would like that, I think the way the board is gonna complain about it if we're not right up front of the process.
We're also going to be held accountable. If
So,
it makes
and we will be held accountable.
Well, yeah,
So
we
we
need
need
to be
to be
aware of
able to
it, but I
Yeah.
think they should have more input. I think you can make mistakes when
Because
the
you know what
whoever
happened in
used the
Verona,
building
right?
don't get the input.
They did the 21st century all wall glass walls, and then people are like, people can shoot my kid now, so they had to go cover all the glass.
Well, or like the lack of walls at Senate, which they just corrected a few years ago. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, there are trends that you want to be careful about.
I think it'd be important for the board to have that discussion and hear from the architects, because
Right.
the other point of view is, the some prairie schools, Wanakee is, it's much safer because you now have vision and you can see,
Right.
so that,
I don't agree with that, but that was a problem that they had to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Parents were like, my kids aren't
so
safe.
I would agree the board should
Have
be
a talk
aware
at this level.
before there's a
Right,
final.
yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, and particularly so that, we've, one of this is we answers about these things on these ideas. You know, like one of the complaints we have at Glacial Drumlin is that the way it's facing, it's always windy when you're trying to walk in
Boy,
and
that's
cold.
for sure.
Hey, wind tunnel.
And it's like, well,
Should
there's
have wind power there.
and right, if you don't have a school there, you might not realize that, so one of the considerations that I would raise is let's build it so you go around behind it.
I'd just like to express one eternal truth about teachers.
Mm-hmm.
If there is an opening in glass or any other kind of aperture in
gonna
the
cover it
outside
up.
world, the teacher will cover it up.
That's pretty true.
I just want to go on record that I should be recovered from the Bears Super Bowl win by February 6th, so we should be good.
It's not too far away.
And if they lose?
Then I won't be recovered, I might have to switch it a week.
Okay.
Alrighty.
I'd look for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I did, second.
Okay.